They say family is everything. They lied. My name is Jamie Klein, and this is the story of how my own sister tried to destroy me and how I dismantled her entire world piece by piece until she had nothing left. It started on Christmas Eve. I was serving dinner at a homeless shelter when my phone exploded with panicked messages. "Jamie, come home now. Something's wrong with Alex." My neighbor's voice was shaking. "I can hear him crying outside your house. Jamie, please hurry." I drove through that frozen night doing 80 miles an hour, my hands gripping the wheel so hard they went numb. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Christmas lights blazing, heard laughter and music pouring from inside my $680 $1,000 home. But on the porch, barely visible in the shadows, was my 6-year-old son, chained, like an animal, in 3-degree weather. While inside, my sister Lily and her husband Derek were hosting a champagne party, eating lobster and prime rib, opening expensive gifts, all paid for with money they'd stolen from me. That night, something inside me shattered, and from those broken pieces, I became someone they never saw coming. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about revenge. It's about hidden cameras, federal crimes, kidnapped children, fake identities, and a sister who knew secrets that could destroy everything. By the end, you'll understand why some people don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve justice. And I made damn sure they got it. Stay with me. You won't believe where this goes. My name is Jamie Klein. I'm 35 years old, a medical administration coordinator at Seattle General Hospital, and a single mother to the most beautiful 6-year-old boy in the world. On paper, my life looks successful. Good job, nice home, healthy child. But the truth, I spent 35 years being invisible in my own family, and I never understood why. Let me take you back before that terrible Christmas night before everything fell apart. Because to understand what I did, you need to understand what they did to me. For decades, I grew up knowing I was different. Not special different, wrong different. The kind of different that makes you walk on eggshells in your own home, constantly trying to earn a love that never quite materializes. My sister Lily, 3 years younger, was the sun around which our family orbited. I was more like a distant moon, acknowledged when necessary, ignored the rest of the time. I remember my high school graduation with painful clarity. I was valedictorian, gave the commencement speech, received a full academic scholarship to the University of Washington. My mother took exactly 4 photos I counted before checking her watch. Lily, then 15, had a dance recital across town starting in 2 hours. "We should get going," Mom said, already gathering her purse. "Traffic will be terrible." My father nodded, barely glancing at the diploma in my hands. They left before the ceremony even ended, before my name was called for special honors, before my friends' parents congratulated me with flowers and proud tears. I stood in that parking lot watching them drive away, my scholarship certificate clutched in my hand, and told myself it was fine. They were busy. They had another daughter to support. It wasn't personal. But it was always personal. 4 years later, when my college acceptance to the nursing program arrived, a program with only a 15% acceptance rate, I rushed home to share the news. I found my parents in the living room, champagne already open, celebrating. For a moment, my heart soared. They knew. They were proud. Then Lily walked in grinning and announced she'd gotten a boyfriend. A nice boy from her community college art class. That's what the champagne was for. My acceptance letter sat unopened on the kitchen counter for 3 days. The pattern continued through every milestone. I made junior administrator at 27, youngest in the hospital's history. My parents sent a card. Lily got engaged to Derek, a man she'd known for 4 months, and they threw her a $15,000 engagement party at the country club. When I bought my house at 33, scraping together a down payment through years of 60-hour work weeks and ruthless saving, my father's only comment was, "Well, the market's been good. You got lucky with the timing." Lucky. That word haunted me. As if my 2 jobs through college, morning shift at the hospital cafeteria, evening shift at the campus library, were luck. As if my perfect attendance record, my extra certifications, my strategic career moves were all just fortunate accidents. Meanwhile, Lily drifted from job to job, from crisis to crisis, and every stumble was met with sympathy and financial bailouts. I learned to stop expecting praise. I learned to stop expecting much of anything, really. Instead, I focused on building something they couldn't dismiss or diminish: my own life, my own family. At 29, after watching Lily's chaotic marriage and realizing I didn't want to wait for some hypothetical partner, I chose IVF. I wanted a child. I wanted to give someone the unconditional love I'd never received. My parents were horrified. What will people think? But I didn't care anymore. When Alex was born, something shifted in me permanently. Holding that tiny, perfect baby, I made a silent vow he would never feel overlooked. He would never wonder why he wasn't enough. If I couldn't change how my family treated me, I could change how I treated my son. And I did. I was present for every moment, every midnight feeding, every first word, every scraped knee. I read parenting books obsessively. I took him to the park every Saturday, regardless of weather. I attended every pediatrician appointment with a list of questions. Alex became my purpose, my joy, my proof that I was capable of the love my parents never quite managed to show me. But even as I built this new life, there were things I couldn't ignore. Little discrepancies that nagged at me during sleepless nights. I'd noticed them since childhood, but never had the courage to ask the hard questions. Like the family photo albums. Every other family I knew had baby pictures, hospital photos, first bath, coming home from the hospital. Our albums had Lily's entire infancy documented in exhaustive detail. But my earliest photo was dated when I was 3 years old, sitting on a park bench, looking uncomfortable and confused. No baby pictures, no toddler photos, nothing before age 3. When I asked about it once at maybe 10 years old, my mother said simply, "We lost those in a move." But we'd never moved. We'd lived in the same house my entire childhood. Then there was my blood type. I discovered it at 16 when I donated blood for the first time. O negative. My mother was A positive. My father was B positive. I'd taken biology. I knew the genetics didn't add up. When I mentioned it, my father got angry, actually angry, which was rare for him. "Blood types are more complicated than high school science class," he snapped. "Don't question things you don't understand." I never brought it up again. And physically, I looked nothing like anyone in my family. Lily had my mother's round face, my father's dark hair and brown eyes. I had hazel eyes that shifted color in different light, a narrow face with sharp cheekbones and auburn hair that curled stubbornly despite every straightening attempt. Distant relatives would comment sometimes, "Funny, Jamie doesn't really look like either of you." My parents would change the subject quickly, seamlessly, as if the observation had never been made. For years I told myself these inconsistencies didn't matter. Maybe I was adopted, so what? Maybe there was some family secret, did it change who I was? I built my identity around what I could control: my work ethic, my independence, my son. The past was the past, but secrets have a way of surfacing. And the truth about my family, about who I really was, and why they'd treated me like a temporary guest in their lives, was about to explode in the most devastating way possible. Because the real reason behind their disdain was buried in documents I'd never seen, documents that would surface in the worst possible way. I should have seen it coming. Looking back now, every warning sign was there, flashing red like emergency lights. But when you've spent your whole life trying to be the good daughter, the accommodating sister, the peacemaker, you don't see manipulation. You see family in need. It was a Tuesday evening in early September when Lily showed up at my door. I remember because Alex had just started first grade that week, and I was still adjusting to the new school schedule. The doorbell rang at 8:30 past his bedtime, and I opened it to find my sister standing on my porch with tears streaming down her face. "Jamie, I'm so sorry to come by like this," she sobbed, mascara creating dark tracks down her cheeks. "I didn't know where else to go." I ushered her inside, my heart already sinking. Lily only cried when she wanted something. "What's wrong? Is it Derek?" She collapsed onto my couch, the one I'd saved 6 months to buy, and the story poured out between hiccuping sobs. Derek had lost his job 3 weeks ago. They'd been hiding it from everyone, too ashamed to admit failure. They'd burned through their savings trying to maintain appearances. Now they were facing eviction. They had nowhere to go. Could they please stay with me? Just temporarily. 3 months maximum. Just until Derek found new work and they got back on their feet. I know it's a lot to ask, Lily said, grabbing my hands. Her grip was desperate, almost painful. But Jamie, I have nowhere else to turn. And it's not just about me and Derek. We need stability, structure. You understand that, right? You're a mother. You know what kids need. That last part was the hook, and she knew it. My weakness, my Achilles heel, has always been children. I couldn't stand the thought of any child suffering, even hypothetically. Even though Lily didn't actually have children, the implication was clear. This instability could affect Alex, could disrupt his routine. Or worse, they might end up homeless. And what kind of sister would I be then? 3 months, I heard myself saying, even as something in my gut twisted with unease. But we need clear boundaries. You and Derek can use the guest room. I keep the master bedroom. Alex's routine doesn't change. And you respect my house rules: no smoking inside, quiet after 9, everyone contributes to groceries. Lily threw her arms around me. Oh, Jamie, thank you. You're saving our lives. I promise we'll be the perfect house guests. You won't even know we're here. That promise lasted exactly 11 days. The first change was subtle. I came home from a double shift at the hospital to find my living room furniture rearranged. The couch I'd carefully positioned to catch the afternoon light was shoved against the opposite wall. My grandmother's antique side table, the only thing I had from my family that held sentimental value, was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern lamp I'd never seen before. Oh, I hope you don't mind, Lily said breezily when I asked about it. Your layout was just so dated. This opens up the space much better. Trust me, I took an interior design course last year. And that old table was falling apart anyway. I moved it to the garage. You should really consider modernizing your style, Jamie. I bit my tongue. Pick your battles, I told myself. It's just furniture. She's going through a hard time. The following week, I came home to find 6 women I'd never met drinking wine in my living room. Lily had started a book club. She hadn't asked permission. She hadn't even mentioned it. Jamie, perfect timing, Lily announced as I stood in the doorway, still in my scrubs, exhausted from a 10-hour shift. Ladies, this is my sister Jamie. She's letting us use her gorgeous house for our weekly meetings. Isn't she generous? The women smiled at me like I was the hired help. One of them, a blonde and expensive athleisure, actually said, "So sweet of you to let Lily host. She has such an eye for making a house feel like a home." My house. My home. But I smiled and retreated to my bedroom where Alex was doing homework. At least he still had his routine, his stability. That's what mattered. Then came the locks. I arrived home one evening to find I couldn't get my key to work. Panicked, I knocked, and Derek answered, looking annoyed. "Oh, didn't Lily tell you we changed the locks today? Security measure, you never know who has copies of old keys. Previous owner's maintenance people, whatever. Here's your new key." He dropped it in my palm like he was doing me a favor. In my own house. My name on the deed. My mortgage payments. And I was getting a new key like a guest being granted access. "You should have asked me first," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Derek shrugged. "It's done now. Just being cautious. You can thank us later." That same week, strange mail started arriving. Credit card statements from companies I'd never used, collection notices for accounts I'd never opened. The amounts were small at first, $500 here, $800 there, but they kept coming. I showed one to Lily, my stomach churning with anxiety. "This says I have a balance of $2,300 with this credit card company, but I never applied for this card." Lily barely glanced at it. "Oh, that's probably just junk mail. Or identity theft, it's so common these days. You know how it is. Someone probably got your info from some data breach. You should check your credit report, freeze your accounts, all that stuff. Here, I'll help you. I went through this last year." She took the papers from my hand and filed them in my desk drawer. "Don't worry about it right now. You're so busy with work and Alex. I'll help you sort through it this weekend." The weekend came and went. She never mentioned it again. I was working doubles trying to save for Alex's college fund, coming home exhausted, barely able to make dinner before collapsing into bed. The papers sat in that drawer, and I told myself I'd deal with it later. I trusted my sister. Surely she wouldn't lie about something so serious. By Thanksgiving, my house was unrecognizable. The walls I'd painted a soft sage green were now a stark gray. Expensive leather furniture I'd never seen before dominated the living room. A massive flat-screen TV hung where my family photos used to be. Lily hosted Thanksgiving dinner in my house, inviting her friends without asking me first. She introduced everyone to our home. Our home. The words grated like sandpaper against my skin. After the guests left, I tried to talk to her. Gently, carefully, the way you approach a wild animal. "Lily, I appreciate that you're trying to help with the house, but I need you to run major changes by me first. This is still my home and your home." She turned on me. Her face twisted with sudden fury. "Are you serious right now? I'm family, Jamie? We're supposed to share everything. Or is that only when you want something from us? After everything Mom and Dad did for you, after they took you in and gave you a family. This is how you treat your own sister. By being controlling and territorial. I'm trying to help you. Trying to bring some life to this sad little house. And you're acting like I'm some kind of criminal." The words hit like a slap. "Took you in." The phrase hung in the air between us, sharp and strange. What did that mean? But I was too tired to fight, too confused by her sudden rage, too programmed by decades of backing down to keep the peace. "I'm sorry," I heard myself saying. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just stressed with work." Lily's face softened instantly, the anger vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "I know, sweetie. You work so hard. Too hard, really. Let me take care of things here. That's what family does." I retreated to my bedroom, the only room that still felt like mine, and tried to shake the feeling that I was a stranger in my own home, that I'd made a terrible mistake, that something was very, very wrong. But I kept telling myself it was temporary. 3 months. Just 3 months. I could survive anything for 3 months. And then Christmas came with a message that changed everything. Christmas Eve started like every Christmas Eve for the past 7 years. At 6:30 in the evening, I kissed Alex goodbye, bundled in his favorite red sweater, and headed to the downtown homeless shelter where I volunteered every year. It was my tradition started the first Christmas after Alex was born, a way to honor the difficult childhood I'd survived and give back to others who were struggling. Lily had rolled her eyes when I told her I was going. "On Christmas Eve, really, Jamie? You're going to abandon your family on the most important night of the year to serve strangers. I'll be back by 9. I'd said, ignoring the barb. "Alex will be asleep by then anyway. You're hosting that party for your friends, so you'll be busy." She'd waved me away dismissively, already on her phone coordinating with caterers. Yes, caterers. For a party in my house. With money, I still didn't understand how she had. The shelter was warm and crowded, filled with the smell of turkey and stuffing. I was ladling mashed potatoes onto plates, chatting with an elderly woman named Dorothy, who came every year when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. I ignored it at first. The shelter had a policy about phones during service hours. We were supposed to be present, focused on the people in front of us. But it kept buzzing. Insistent. Urgent. During a lull in the dinner line, I pulled it out. 7 missed texts, 3 missed calls, all from Mrs. Margaret, my neighbor. Margaret was 72, a retired schoolteacher who'd lived next door for 40 years. She was kind, but reserved, the type who believed in minding her own business. She'd never contacted me like this before. My hands started shaking as I read the first text sent at 7:15. "Jamie, you need to come home right now. Something is wrong with Alex." My heart dropped into my stomach. I scrolled frantically to the next message sent 3 minutes later. I can hear him crying outside. I called out to Lily, but she won't answer the door. I don't know what to do. Then another timestamp, 7:22. Jamie, please. He's been out there for over an hour. It's so cold tonight. I fumbled for my coat with trembling fingers, nearly knocking over the entire pot of mashed potatoes. The shelter coordinator, seeing my face, asked if everything was okay. I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up completely. There was a voicemail left at 7:31. I pressed play with shaking hands and heard Margaret's voice, thin and frightened in a way that made my blood run cold. Jamie, I don't want to overstep, but I called 911. They said they can't do anything without evidence of immediate danger, that it's a family matter, but I can still hear him crying. And Jamie, it's 15 degrees out here and I don't know what to do, and I'm so sorry, but please hurry. I dropped my phone. It clattered onto the industrial kitchen floor, the screen cracking in a spiderweb pattern, but I barely noticed. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Around me, volunteers were asking questions, their voices distant and muffled like I was underwater. Someone picked up my phone and pressed it into my hands. Someone else grabbed my coat and purse. I don't remember getting to my car. I don't remember starting the engine. The next thing I knew, I was flying down 4th Avenue, doing 60 in a 35 zone. My cracked phone screen lit up on the passenger seat, Margaret's contact photo staring at me. The 20-minute drive felt like hours. My mind kept conjuring images, each worse than the last. Alex hurt, Alex sick, Alex unconscious. I tried calling Lily, straight to voicemail. I tried Derek. No answer. I called Margaret back, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the right buttons. She answered on the first ring. Jamie, where are you? I'm coming, I'm 10 minutes away, what's happening? My voice came out high and strangled, barely recognizable as my own. The police came and left. They said without being able to see him or confirm he's in distress, they can't force entry. But Jamie, I can still hear him. He's crying so quietly now, like he's given up. And it's so cold. I tried to go up to the porch, but your sister opened the door and told me to mind my own business, and threatened to call the police on me for trespassing. On you? She threatened you. The words didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. I'm still out here, Margaret continued, her voice breaking. I won't leave him alone. I have a blanket, but I can't get close enough to give it to him. Oh God, Jamie, I'm so sorry. I should have called you sooner. I heard things before, noises that worried me, but I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was hearing things wrong and I didn't want to interfere in family business. But I should have. It's not your fault. I choked out, though. Guilt was already spreading through my chest like poison. Every single time I'd left Alex with Lily while I worked double shifts. Every time I'd come home and he'd seemed subdued, quiet, different. Every time Lily had explained it away. He's just tired. He was fine all day, just got cranky before you got home. You baby him too much, Jamie. Kids need structure and discipline. Structure. Discipline. The words echoed in my head as I blew through a red light horn blaring behind me. And Alex's small voice 3 weeks ago, so quiet I'd almost missed it. Mommy, do I have to stay with Aunt Lily tomorrow? Just for a few hours, baby. Mommy has to work. But I don't like when you're not home. I know, sweetheart, but Aunt Lily takes good care of you, right? He'd nodded, but his eyes had filled with tears. And I'd assumed he was just going through a clingy phase. I'd assumed everything was fine because I wanted to believe my sister, my family, wouldn't hurt the person I loved most in the world. I'd been so stupid, so blind, so desperate to believe in family that I'd missed every warning sign. The signs had been everywhere. Alex flinching when Lily raised her voice. Alex suddenly refusing to eat certain foods he'd always loved. Alex waking up with nightmares he couldn't or wouldn't explain. The weight he'd lost. The way he'd started asking over and over, when are they leaving Mommy? When do we get our house back? And I'd dismissed it all, chalked it up to adjustment to the stress of having house guests, to normal childhood phases. My speedometer hit 70. The streetlights blurred past. Silent tears streamed down my face as I gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make my knuckles white. Please let him be okay. Please, please, please. I turned onto my street at 10:45. Even from 2 blocks away, I could see my house lit up like a beacon. Every window blazed with warm golden light. Christmas lights dripped from the eaves, twinkling red and green. The driveway was packed with cars. I could hear music pulsing even through my closed windows, some jazz rendition of Jingle Bells. It looked like a Christmas card, like joy and celebration and everything the holiday was supposed to be. I slammed on my brakes in front of my house. My car skidded slightly on a patch of ice before jerking to a stop at an angle across my own driveway. I threw it into park and shoved the door open, stumbling out on legs that barely held my weight. The scene seared itself into my memory with the kind of crystalline clarity that comes from trauma, the kind of image you know you'll see every time you close your eyes for the rest of your life. The house blazing with light and warmth, laughter spilling out through the walls, the bass thump of music, shadows moving past the windows, champagne glasses raised in toasts. And there, on the front porch, barely visible in the shadows beyond the reach of the Christmas lights, was my son. Mrs. Margaret stood at the edge of my lawn in her bathrobe and slippers, tears streaming down her weathered face, a blanket clutched uselessly in her shaking hands. She looked at me with such anguish, such guilt, such helpless sorrow that I almost couldn't bear it. "I'm so sorry," she whispered as I stumbled past her. "I'm so sorry." My world had narrowed to a single point. Everything else fell away. The cold, the music, Margaret's voice, the Christmas lights. All of it dissolved into meaningless noise as I moved toward that small figure on my porch. And when I saw what they'd done to my son, something inside me broke forever. He was so small. That was my first coherent thought as I stumbled up the porch steps. My 6-year-old son looked like a toddler curled into himself against the wooden railing, trying to make himself as tiny as possible. A dog leash. They'd used a dog leash. The kind you'd use for a large breed thick nylon with a metal clasp looped through the porch railing and locked around his thin wrist. Alex was still wearing his pajamas, the flannel ones with the dinosaurs that he'd gotten last Christmas. Just pajamas. No coat, no shoes, no socks. His lips were blue. Not pale pink or even white, but actually blue, the color of a winter sky at dusk. His small body convulsed with shivers so violent I could see them from 3 feet away, his shoulders jerking, his legs tucked up against his chest in a desperate attempt to conserve warmth. "Alex!" I choked out, dropping to my knees beside him. The concrete was like ice through my jeans, but I barely felt it. "Baby, I'm here. Mommy's here." He turned his face toward me, and the look in his eyes will haunt me until the day I die. It wasn't relief. It wasn't even hope. It was resignation. The look of a child who'd stopped believing rescue would come. "Mommy." He whispered, his voice so hoarse it was barely audible. "So cold. I'm sorry I was bad. I'm sorry. I'll be good now. Promise." My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't work the clasp on the leash. I fumbled with it, my vision blurring with tears, my fingers numb with cold and shock, and a rage so profound I couldn't even name it yet. "Let me help." Mrs. Margaret was suddenly beside me, her weathered hands steadier than mine. Together we worked the clasp, and when it finally released, the metal had left a deep red welt in Alex's skin. "I found him at 8:30, Margaret said, her voice breaking. "I was taking out my trash and I heard crying. At first I thought it was a cat, and then I realized it was coming from your porch. When I saw him, I called out to your sister, banged on the door, but she just yelled at me to mind my own business. I've been out here for over 2 hours, trying to keep watch over him, trying to keep him warm from a distance. I was afraid if I took him, if I touched him, they'd say I was kidnapping him or something. I was afraid of legal trouble, afraid of making things worse. I'm so sorry, Jamie. I should have just grabbed him and damn the consequences. No, I managed to say, though my throat felt like it was closing. You did the right thing. You called me. You stayed with him. You called 911. But even as I said it, I was thinking I should have known. I should have seen this coming. I should have protected him. I gathered Alex into my arms, and the feel of his ice-cold skin against mine was like being stabbed. He was shaking so hard his teeth chattered a horrible clicking sound that seemed impossibly loud in the cold night air. I wrapped my coat around him, but he was so cold, so desperately cold, that I knew we needed more than blankets. We needed a hospital. As I stood preparing to carry him to my car, I got my first clear look at him in the spill of light from Margaret's porch lamp. What I saw made bile rise in my throat. His wrists. Both of them bore rope burns, raw and angry, layered over older marks that had started to heal. This wasn't the first time. The thought hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't the first time they'd restrained him. How many times had I come home from work to find Alex subdued and quiet, and believed Lily's explanations? How many times had this happened while I was pulling double shifts to save money to secure our future? His face had a bruise along the left cheekbone, yellowish at the edges. At least a week old, maybe more. Someone had hit my son hard enough to leave a mark that lasted over a week, and I hadn't noticed. I'd been so buried in work, so exhausted, so desperate to believe that family meant safety, that I'd missed it. And his body. When had he gotten so thin? His shoulder blades jutted through the thin fabric of his pajamas like bird wings. His collarbones were sharp ridges. His face, always round with childhood, had gone hollow around the cheeks. "Jamie," Margaret whispered urgently, touching my arm. "There's something in his pocket." I felt it when I was trying to warm him up earlier, checking to make sure he wasn't injured. "I think you should look." With trembling fingers, I reached into the pocket of Alex's pajama bottoms. My fingers closed around something small and hard, shaped like a toy car. I pulled it out. It was a keychain, bright red plastic, the kind you'd get from a vending machine. It looked like nothing. "It's a recording device," Margaret said quietly. "My grandson had one like it before, well before what happened to him. I ordered one online 2 weeks ago. I gave it to Alex when you were at work one day. I told him it was a secret toy that if anything scary happened, he should press the red button on the bottom. I told him it was magic, that it would help keep him safe." I stared at the small plastic car in my palm, my brain struggling to process what she was saying. Recording device. Press and hold the red button. It plays back everything it's recorded. "I'm so sorry, Jamie. I should have told you I was worried. I should have done more. But I heard things, saw things, and I had to give him something. Some way to prove what was happening if no one believed him." My hand closed around the device. Later. I'd look at it later. Right now, I needed to get Alex to the hospital. I carried him toward my car, his small body so light it terrified me. Over his head, through the large front windows of my house, I could see everything. The Christmas party was in full swing. The living room I'd once decorated with such care, the room where Alex and I had spent quiet evenings reading together, had been transformed into something I barely recognized. Elegant guests in cocktail dresses and suits mingled with champagne flutes. The dining table, my dining table, the one I'd bought with my first promotion, groaned under the weight of an elaborate spread. I could see lobster tails glistening with butter, a massive prime rib roast, towers of desserts on silver platters, bottles of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. And there, in the center of it all, was Lily. She wore a red dress I'd never seen before, something designer that hugged her figure perfectly. Her hair was professionally styled. She held a champagne glass in one manicured hand and threw her head back, laughing at something a handsome man in a suit had said. The Christmas tree behind her was enormous, at least 9 feet tall, decorated with what looked like hundreds of ornaments, and draped with presents wrapped in expensive paper. Derek stood by the fireplace, his arm around another woman's shoulders, in a way that seemed too familiar, too comfortable. He was telling some story, gesturing with his free hand, and the group around him laughed right on cue. He looked relaxed, happy, like a man without a care in the world. Not one person in that house had come to check on the crying they must have heard. Not one guest had thought to investigate the noise outside. Or maybe they had heard it and simply didn't care. Maybe Lily had waved it off with some joke, some dismissive comment, and they'd all gone back to their lobster and champagne. In my arms, Alex shivered violently, and I held him tighter. Something was happening inside me, something I'd never felt before. The shock was draining away, leaving behind something else. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. I'd spent 35 years being overlooked, being dismissed, being made to feel like I was the problem. I'd accepted it, internalized it, let it shape me into someone who apologized for existing, who made herself smaller to avoid conflict. But they'd tortured my child. They'd chained him outside like an animal while they partied in the home I'd built with my own hands, my own money, my own sweat and sacrifice. And they'd done it on Christmas Eve, the night I'd chosen to serve others, the night I'd tried to honor the meaning of family and compassion. A part of me I'd never known existed woke up in that moment. The part that doesn't forgive. The part that doesn't forget. The part that doesn't back down. Margaret opened my car door for me, and I settled Alex into the back seat, my coat still wrapped around him. "I'm calling the hospital to tell them we're coming," I said, my voice steady now, cold and clear. "And then I'm calling the police." "Good," Margaret said fiercely. "I'll be here. I'll testify to everything I saw, everything." I looked back at my house one more time at the party, continuing in warm, bright oblivion, and I made a promise to myself and to my son they would pay for this. Every single one of them who participated, who enabled, who looked away. But what I found inside that house would prove this wasn't just neglect, it was calculated torture. The emergency room at Seattle General was nearly empty at 2 a.m. on Christmas Day. Most people were home with their families, warm and safe. Not us. Never us. Alex had been whisked away the moment we arrived. 3 nurses and a doctor surrounding him, asking questions I could barely answer through my shock. Hypothermia, possible frostbite, severe dehydration, malnutrition. The words kept coming clinical and precise, each one another knife in my chest. Mrs. Margaret had followed us to the hospital in her own car. She sat beside me now in the harsh fluorescent waiting room, still wearing her bathrobe under a winter coat, her slippers traded for boots. In my hand, I still clutched that small red plastic keychain. "You should look at it," Margaret said quietly. "Before the police arrive. You need to know what you're dealing with." My hands trembled as I turned the device over. It looked so innocent, like something you'd win at a carnival. But Margaret showed me the tiny lens hidden in what looked like a headlight, the miniature USB port concealed underneath. "My grandson Michael had one like this," she said, her voice heavy with old pain. 5 years ago. He was living with his mother and her boyfriend. I suspected things weren't right, but I didn't have proof. After what happened to him..." She stopped, swallowed hard. "After he was hospitalized, I learned about these devices. I started carrying them, giving them to children when I got that feeling in my gut. I gave this to Alex 2 weeks ago when you were at work. I told him it was magic, that it would help protect him if anything bad happened. I told him to press the red button if he was scared." She showed me how to plug it into my phone, how to access the files. The screen loaded, showing a folder labeled with dates. 47 video files. 47 times my son had pressed that button because he was scared. The first file was dated October 15th, just 6 weeks after Lily had moved in. My finger hovered over the play button, my whole body shaking. "Watch it," Margaret whispered. "I know it's hard, but you need to see." I pressed play. The video was dark and shaky at first, the audio muffled. Then it steadied and I could see what the camera saw from Alex's pajama pocket. Lily's face twisted with rage, looming over him. "I said get in there." Her voice was sharp, cruel. The camera jolted as she shoved him, and suddenly the view was of a dark, enclosed space. A closet. I could hear Alex's breathing fast and panicked. "No dinner for you, you little brat." Lily's voice came from outside. "Your mother spoils you, makes you think you can cry and whine about everything." "Well, I'm teaching you discipline. Real discipline. Maybe 3 hours in there will teach you to keep quiet." The door slammed. A lock clicked. And then, in the darkness of that closet, my 6-year-old son began to cry. Not loud theatrical crying. Quiet, hopeless sobbing that cut straight through my heart. The video lasted 3 hours and 14 minutes. I skipped through it, unable to watch the whole thing, seeing timestamps of him trying the door, calling for me, eventually going silent. I clicked on the next file. And the next. Each one worse than the last. Video from October 23rd. Alex at the kitchen table, his hand reaching for a glass of juice. His elbow bumps it and the glass tips, spilling across the table. The camera catches Lily's hand as it comes into frame and slaps him across the face. The sound is sickeningly loud. "Clumsy little brat, clean it up. No, don't use paper towels, use your tongue. That's right, lick it up like the animal you are." Video from November 8th. Alex standing in the corner of the living room, his small body swaying with exhaustion. The timestamp shows 2 hours passing. When he finally sags against the wall, too tired to stand anymore, Lily's voice. "I said stand up straight." The camera jolts as she shoves him hard. He falls, hitting his head on the baseboard. "Get back in that corner. We're going for 3 hours now." Video from November 20th. Lily opening the refrigerator, Alex's voice small and scared, asking if he can have lunch. "You ate breakfast. That's enough. You're getting fat anyway. Your mother feeds you too much. You can eat at dinner." Except, I now remembered that night. I'd come home to find Alex already in bed at 7 p.m. "He wasn't feeling well," Lily had said. "I think he's coming down with something." He hadn't been sick. He'd been starving. But the worst was the last video recorded just yesterday morning. December 23rd, the timestamp read 9:47 a.m. I'd already left for my morning shift. The camera showed Derek's face grinning as he grabbed Alex's arms and held them behind his back. "Come on, little man, just hold still. This'll only hurt if you struggle." "Please, Uncle Derek, I'll be good." Alex's voice was terrified. "You're always good at being annoying." Derek laughed. Lily came into frame with rope in her hands, the same rope I'd seen the burns from. She wrapped it around Alex's wrists, pulling it tight enough that Alex cried out. "This'll teach him to keep his mouth shut when your sister gets home," Derek said, still laughing like this was all a joke. "Can't have him running to Mommy about every little thing." "Jamie's too soft on him anyway," Lily said, tying the final knot. "Someone needs to toughen him up." They left him like that for hours. The video showed the clock on the wall, 9:47 a.m. to 2:33 p.m. Almost 5 hours with his hands tied behind his back, unable to move, unable to use the bathroom, unable to do anything but sit there in pain. I watched the entire thing through tears that wouldn't stop my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone. Margaret sat beside me crying too, her hand on my shoulder. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't stress or bad judgment or even anger. This was systematic. This was calculated. This was torture, pure and simple, and they'd enjoyed it. A nurse appeared to tell me Alex was stable, that they were admitting him overnight for observation. They'd given him something to help him sleep. He wouldn't wake until morning. "You should go home," the nurse said gently. "Get some rest. He's safe here." But I couldn't rest. I couldn't think. All I could see was those videos playing on loop in my mind. "I'm going back to the house," I heard myself say. "Jamie, no," Margaret protested. "You need to wait for the police. You need to—" "I need to see them," I interrupted. My voice sounded strange, cold and flat. "I need to see their faces." Against every piece of medical advice against Margaret's protests, I got in my car and drove back through the dark streets to my house. It was 4 a.m. Surely the party would be over. It wasn't. I walked up to my own front door at 4:17 a.m. and found it unlocked. Music still pounded from inside, though it had degraded from jazz standards to stumbling drunk karaoke. The smell of alcohol and stale food hit me as I pushed the door open. The living room was a disaster. Empty wine bottles covered every surface. Food had been ground into my carpet. Someone's jacket was draped over the TV, and in the center of it all, standing on my coffee table in her stocking feet, was Lily. "To my wonderful house," she shouted, raising a champagne bottle over her head. She was swaying drunk and unsteady. "And to my generous, generous husband who makes all this possible." Derek, also clearly drunk, raised his own bottle from where he slouched in my armchair. The remaining guests, maybe 8 or 9 people I'd never seen before, cheered and clinked glasses. Not one person had asked about Alex. Not one person had noticed a child was missing, or if they had noticed, they hadn't cared enough to mention it. I stood in the doorway of my own home, invisible to these people who'd taken over my life, and something inside me crystallized into perfect cold clarity. I didn't announce myself. I didn't shout or scream or cry. I simply pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. I photographed everything. The empty champagne bottles lined up on the kitchen counter, labels facing out so the prices were visible. $200 each. 6 of them. I photographed the designer shopping bags tossed carelessly in the corner, the tags still attached to clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I found the catering receipt crumpled near the trash, smoothed it out, and photographed it with steady hands. $3,000 for last night's party. The credit card number was partially visible, and my stomach dropped when I recognized it as one of the mysterious statements I'd received weeks ago and filed away. They hadn't just stolen my house. They'd stolen my identity to throw a party, while my son froze outside. The guests had finally stumbled out around 5 in the morning, leaving destruction in their wake. Lily and Derek were passed out upstairs in what used to be my guest room. I moved through my house like a ghost, documenting every detail with my phone's camera, making sure each photo was time-stamped and geotagged. Evidence. It all needed to be evidence. At 7 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes, I sat at my kitchen table and called the number the hospital social worker had given me. The child abuse hotline. The words felt surreal even as I dialed, like something that happened to other people. Not me. Not my family. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice gentle but professional. "National Child Abuse Hotline, this is Patricia. How can I help you?" I'd thought I was done crying. I was wrong. The moment I tried to speak, my voice broke. "My sister hurt my son. They..." I couldn't get the words out. "Take your time," Patricia said. "You're safe right now. Your child is safe. Just breathe and tell me what happened." So I did. I told her everything. The chaining, the hypothermia, the videos, the months of systematic abuse I'd been too blind to see. Patricia listened without interrupting, and when I finally finished, she said something that changed everything. "You're doing the right thing. Your son is incredibly lucky to have you. I know this feels overwhelming, but you're already taking the right steps. Now I'm going to walk you through what comes next, and I need you to write this down." I grabbed a pen in the back of one of Lily's catering receipts. My hand was steadier than it had been in hours. I had a purpose now, a path forward. First, you keep documenting everything. Every injury, every piece of evidence. Take photos, make notes, save everything. Second, and this is crucial, do not confront your sister or her husband directly. When abusers are cornered, they often escalate. They can become dangerous. Let the authorities handle the confrontation. Your job is to keep yourself and your son safe and gather evidence. Do you understand? "Yes," I said. My voice was clear now. Strong. Third, you file a police report as soon as possible. Bring all your evidence. Fourth, Child Protective Services will be involved. They'll investigate, and it might feel intrusive, but they're there to help. They'll want to interview you, your son, possibly neighbors or witnesses. Be completely honest with them. And fifth, get a lawyer. Even if you can't afford much, there are organizations that help pro bono in cases like this. I wrote it all down, every instruction, every number she gave me. By the time we finished, I had 2 full pages of notes and a sense of direction I hadn't felt since I'd gotten that first panicked text from Margaret. "One more thing," Patricia said before we hung up. "Your son told you he was sorry that he'd been bad. That's very common in abuse victims, especially children. They internalize the abuse and blame themselves. Get him into therapy as soon as possible. And Jamie, you did nothing wrong. None of this is your fault. You couldn't have known." But I should have known. That thought would haunt me for months to come. At noon, I heard a gentle knock on my front door. I'd locked it after documenting the party aftermath, something I should have done months ago. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Margaret still looking exhausted but determined. She was carrying a laptop and a USB drive. "I couldn't sleep," she said when I let her in, glancing nervously toward the stairs where Lily and Derek were still unconscious. So I went through all my doorbell camera footage from the past 3 months. "Jamie, you need to see this." We sat at my kitchen table and she opened her laptop with shaking hands. "I installed the camera in September after some packages went missing in the neighborhood. It records everything that happens on my front porch and has a pretty clear view of your porch, too. I never imagined I'd need it for something like this." She pulled up the first video dated December 24th, time-stamped 6:03 p.m., just 27 minutes after I'd left for the shelter. The footage was clear, heartbreakingly clear. Derek dragged Alex out onto the porch by his arm, Alex struggling and crying. Lily followed, her face twisted with anger. The audio was muffled, but audible. "You want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about." Lily's voice carried across the yards. "You think you're so special? You think Mommy's always going to save you? Well, she's not here now, is she?" Derek's laugh was clearly audible. "Maybe a few hours in the cold will cool down that attitude." The video showed them chaining him to the railing, then going back inside. Through Margaret's camera angle, I could see Alex's small figure curled up on the porch alone. "There's more," Margaret said quietly, scrolling through files. November 30th, they locked him out for 2 hours. November 15th, another hour. October 28th, October 12th, September 25th. At least 6 times that my camera caught. And Jamie, there were probably more times when I was out or when my camera was updating. 6 times. At least 6 times they'd locked my son outside like an unwanted pet, and I'd come home to find him quiet and subdued, believing Lily when she said he was just tired or had been misbehaving. Margaret transferred all the files to the USB drive, her hands trembling. "I should have called the police the first time. I should have knocked on your door, told you what I was seeing. I was so worried about overstepping, about being the nosy neighbor, about maybe misunderstanding what I was seeing. And because I hesitated, Alex suffered for 3 more months." I reached across the table and took her weathered hands in mine. "You gave Alex that recording device. You gave him a way to document what was happening when no one was there to witness it. You probably saved his life, Margaret. Without that camera, without your footage, it would be my word against theirs. You didn't fail him. You gave him a voice." She squeezed my hands, tears streaming down her face. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the USB drive on the table, thought of the videos on Alex's device, the photos on my phone, the catering receipts and wine bottles and designer shopping bags. Evidence. Mountains of evidence. "I'm going to end this," I said, and my voice was cold and certain. "Not just for Alex. For every child who suffers because adults look away. For every kid who thinks they deserve abuse because no one tells them otherwise. Lily and Derek are going to face consequences. Real, legal, permanent consequences." Margaret nodded. "I'll testify. I'll give them everything I have. Every recording, every observation. I won't stay silent this time." That afternoon, after Margaret left, I sat alone in my kitchen and made a vow. This wasn't about revenge, though I won't lie and say I didn't want them to suffer. This was about justice. About making sure Alex was safe not just today, but forever. About making sure they couldn't do this to another child. I wouldn't scream or rage or physically attack them no matter how much my body ached to. That would make me the villain in the eyes of the law. Instead, I would be methodical, strategic. I would document everything. I would follow every legal procedure perfectly. I would let the system do what it was designed to do. And if the system failed, I would fight harder. Because I finally understood something I should have learned years ago. Strength isn't about being loud or aggressive. It's not about fighting back with violence or drama. Real strength is quiet. It's unstoppable. It's the mother bear who doesn't roar before she attacks. She just attacks. I was done being overlooked, done being dismissed, done being the family doormat who accepted cruelty as love. They'd awakened something in me when they hurt my son, something I didn't know I possessed. And now that it was awake, there would be no going back. But before I could dismantle their lives, I needed to know exactly how deep their crimes went. The hospital discharged Alex on December 26th with strict instructions, rest warmth monitoring for delayed frostbite symptoms, and immediate follow-up with his pediatrician. But our regular pediatrician was on vacation until after New Year's. That's when the hospital social worker, a kind woman named Rachel, gave me a card. "Dr. Sarah Chen," she said quietly. "She specializes in cases like this. She knows how to document injuries properly for legal proceedings. Call her. She'll see Alex as an emergency." I called from the hospital parking lot. "Doctor." Chen's receptionist put me through immediately when I mentioned the circumstances. "Bring him in at 2 o'clock today," Dr. Chen said, "and bring any evidence you have." Dr. Chen's office was in a medical building downtown decorated with cheerful murals that couldn't quite mask the sadness of her specialty. She was maybe 50 with gentle hands and eyes that had seen too much suffering. She examined Alex with a thoroughness that made my own pediatrician look careless by comparison. "May I take photographs?" she asked, and I nodded. She documented everything. The rope burns on his wrists, the fading bruise on his cheek, the smaller bruises I hadn't noticed on his ribs and back. She measured him, weighed him, recorded every detail in a report that grew longer with each observation. "He's severely underweight for his age and height," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "He should be in the 50th percentile. He's in the 10th. His muscle mass is underdeveloped. There are signs of chronic malnutrition. His hair is brittle. His fingernails show ridging. These injuries didn't happen overnight, Ms. Klein. This is systematic abuse over an extended period." I watched her write, filling page after page with clinical observations that translated to my son had been tortured for months, and I'd missed it. When she finished, she gave me copies of everything: medical records, photographs, her detailed notes. "Keep these safe," she said. "Make multiple copies. You're going to need them." Over the next 3 days, I barely slept. Alex stayed with Carol, my biological mother, who'd appeared 2 days after Christmas when Margaret called her. That's a whole other story, one I'll tell later. But having Alex somewhere safe meant I could focus entirely on building my case. I became someone I didn't recognize. Methodical, cold, strategic. I visited every neighbor on my block, knocking on doors, explaining what had happened, asking if they'd seen or heard anything. Most were horrified. 3 of them had security cameras. I collected footage from all of them. Mrs. Park, 2 houses down, had captured Derek and Lily returning from shopping trips in November, their arms loaded with designer bags. The timestamps matched days I'd been working double shifts. Mr. Rodriguez across the street had audio on his camera. His footage from December 10th caught Lily screaming at Alex, her words crystal clear. "Your mother doesn't care about you. That's why she's never here. You're nothing but a burden to her." I downloaded my own home security footage, the system I'd installed when I first bought the house. I'd never checked it regularly, trusted it to just run in the background. Now I watched months of footage, seeing my home invaded, seeing strangers come and go, seeing Lily and Derek treat my house like their personal playground. I backed everything up. 3 separate hard drives, plus cloud storage, plus physical copies on USB drives I gave to my lawyer, to Margaret, to Carol. If they destroyed 1 copy, I had 5 more. My evidence file grew thicker each day. But my resolve grew stronger. On December 28th, Margaret invited me over for tea. I almost declined. I had so much to do, so many calls to make, so much evidence to organize. but something in her voice made me say yes. Her house was small and immaculate, filled with the kind of furniture that had been carefully maintained for decades. Photos covered every surface, but I noticed they all stopped at a certain point. No recent pictures, just old ones from what looked like the 80s and early 90s. She poured tea with shaking hands and sat across from me in her tiny kitchen. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About why I gave Alex that camera. About why I'm willing to do anything to help you." The story came out slowly, painfully, like extracting glass from a wound. 20 years ago, Margaret's daughter Emily married a man named Richard, charming on the surface, cruel underneath. Margaret noticed things early on. The way Emily flinched when Richard raised his voice. The bruises Emily explained away as clumsiness. But Margaret told herself it wasn't her business that Emily was an adult who could make her own choices. Then Emily had a son, Michael, Margaret's only grandchild. He was 5 when I started noticing bruises, Margaret said, her voice barely above a whisper. On his arms, his legs, once a black eye. Emily said he was clumsy, always falling. I wanted to believe her. But Margaret couldn't ignore what she was seeing. She confronted Emily, demanded the truth. Emily broke down and admitted that Richard hit Michael sometimes, when he cried too much, when he was bad. I told her we needed to call the police, get help, but Emily begged me not to. She said Richard would kill her if she lost Michael. She promised she'd leave him. She just needed time to save money, make a plan. She begged me to give her 3 months. Margaret's hands trembled around her teacup. I waited. I gave her time. I believed that love and patience would fix things. 3 months later, Michael was in the hospital with a skull fracture. Someone had smashed his head against a wall. Richard disappeared before the police arrived. They never found him. The silence in the kitchen was suffocating. Emily couldn't handle the guilt, Margaret continued. Child Services took Michael into foster care while she got treatment for a breakdown. When she got out, she refused to fight for custody. Said Michael deserved better than her. The state terminated her rights. Michael was adopted by another family. Tears streamed down Margaret's weathered face. Emily cut contact with me. Said I should have called the police that first day. She was right. I never saw Michael again. Emily died 6 years ago. Overdose. She never forgave herself. And I never forgave myself either. She looked at me with eyes full of decades-old pain. That's why I gave Alex the camera. That's why I won't stay silent this time. I was too afraid to act before, too worried about overstepping, too willing to believe things would get better. And because I waited, I lost everything. My grandson, my daughter, everything. I reached across the table and took her hands. They were cold and fragile in mine. I'm not going to wait, I said. I'm not going to hope things get better. I'm not giving Lily second chances or time to change. People who hurt children don't get second chances. Good, Margaret said fiercely. I'll testify. I'll give you everything I have. I'll stand beside you through every court date, every hearing, whatever it takes. Use my story if it helps. Tell the judge, tell the lawyers, tell anyone who needs to hear it. If my failure can prevent yours, if my loss can protect Alex, then maybe someday Michael will forgive me. You didn't fail, I told her. You believed someone you loved. That's not a crime. But you're not going to let it happen again. That's courage, Margaret. That's redemption. We sat together in that quiet kitchen, 2 women separated by decades, but united by regret and fierce determination. We'd both learned the same terrible lesson: waiting doesn't save children. Action does. Margaret became more than a witness that day. She became my ally, my support, my proof that speaking up, even late, matters more than staying silent forever. But the evidence in my hands was nothing compared to what the hospital was about to discover. Dr. Chen scheduled Alex's follow-up for December 29th, 3 days after his discharge from the emergency room. I'd been checking his fingers and toes obsessively for signs of frostbite, terrified we'd missed something, that tissue damage would appear days later. but his extremities looked good. Pink, warm, responsive. I thought the worst was behind us. I was wrong. Dr. Chen's examination room was painted a soft yellow with cartoon animals on the walls designed to comfort frightened children. Alex sat on the examination table in his underwear, looking small and vulnerable under the harsh medical lighting. I held his hand as Dr. Chen worked her face, growing more troubled with each discovery. "The frostbite is healing well," she said, examining his fingers. "You got him treatment quickly enough that we avoided permanent damage." Then she paused, holding his right hand up to the light. "Jamie, has Alex ever broken any fingers?" My stomach dropped. "No, never. Why?" She gently manipulated his pinky and ring finger. "These two fingers have healed fractures, old ones maybe 4 to 6 weeks ago. See how this bone has a slight thickening here? That's calcification from the healing process. These fingers were definitely broken and never treated." I stared at Alex's small hand, my vision blurring. "Baby, when did you hurt your fingers?" Alex wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't remember." "It's okay to tell us," Dr. Chen said gently. "You're not in trouble." His voice came out tiny, ashamed. "Uncle Derek closed the car door on my hand. He said it was an accident. Aunt Lily said if I told you, you wouldn't love me anymore because I'm clumsy." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the examination table to steady myself. 4 to 6 weeks ago. That would have been late November. I tried to remember if Alex had complained about his hand, if I'd noticed him favoring it, if there had been any sign at all. But I'd been working so much, so exhausted when I came home, so willing to believe Lily when she said everything was fine. Dr. Chen continued her examination with methodical precision. She noted old bruises on his back in various stages of healing, yellow and green and purple, painting a timeline of violence. Bruises on his legs, a small scar on his shoulder that looked like a burn. "This might be from a cigarette," Dr. Chen said quietly, photographing it. "Lily and Derek don't smoke," I said automatically. Then I remembered the party, the guests. Who knew what happened when I wasn't there? When she weighed him, the number on the scale seemed impossible. 38 pounds. He'd weighed 42 pounds at his last checkup in September, just 3 months ago. 4 pounds lost in 3 months for a 6-year-old was catastrophic. "He's severely malnourished," Dr. Chen explained, pulling up growth charts on her computer. "He should be in the 50th percentile for his age and height. He's in the 10th. His body is literally consuming itself to survive. And look at his hair." She gently touched his auburn curls, so like mine. "It's brittle breaking. His fingernails show horizontal ridging, which indicates periods of severe nutritional stress. Jamie, they were systematically starving him." "How did I miss this?" The words came out broken. How did I not see he was losing weight, not see he was hurt? Dr. Chen's eyes were kind but firm. "Because they hid it. Abusers are experts at hiding abuse. They dress children in long sleeves to cover bruises. They explain away weight loss as growth spurts. They gaslight you into thinking everything is fine. This wasn't your failure. This was their crime." But it felt like my failure. Every bruise, every broken bone, every pound lost was another moment I'd been too busy, too tired, too trusting to see what was happening under my own roof. Dr. Chen typed her report with grim efficiency. When she finished, she looked at me seriously. "I'm a mandated reporter, Jamie. I have to file a report with Child Protective Services immediately. They'll open an investigation. It might feel intrusive, but they're there to help. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said. "Do it. Report everything." She made the call from her office while Alex and I waited. He curled up in my lap, something he hadn't done in months, and I realized that was another sign I'd missed. He'd stopped seeking comfort from me because he'd been taught to associate his mother with abandonment. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a hotel room I'd checked into that morning, unable to spend another night in that house when someone knocked on the door. I looked through the peephole to see a woman in her 40s holding a briefcase and an official-looking badge. Ms. Klein, I'm Monica Rodriguez, Child Protective Services. Dr. Chen filed a report this afternoon. May I come in? I let her in, my heart pounding. CPS. The words every parent fears, even innocent ones, because they have the power to take your child away. But Monica's face was kind as she sat across from me in the hotel room's cramped sitting area. I want to be clear from the start, she said. You're not under investigation. Your sister and her husband are. I've already reviewed Dr. Chen's report and the evidence you provided to the police. I'm here to explain what happens next and to ensure Alex's safety. She walked me through the process with patient clarity. Emergency investigation, which had already begun. Interviews with all parties involved, including Alex, but done by a forensic specialist trained to question children without causing additional trauma. Home inspection of both my house and wherever I was currently staying, and, if the evidence supported it, an emergency custody hearing to formally award me temporary custody and restrict Lily and Derek's access. May I see the evidence you've collected? Monica asked. I pulled out my laptop and showed her everything. The videos from Alex's recording device, which she watched with an increasingly stony expression. The medical reports from Dr. Chen. The neighbor statements. Margaret's doorbell camera footage. The photographs of the party aftermath. The credit card statements. By the time I finished, Monica's professional mask had cracked. Her jaw was tight, her eyes hard. Ms. Klein, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of terrible things. But this is one of the clearest, most well-documented cases of systematic abuse I've encountered. The fact that they filmed themselves, that neighbors captured footage, that you have medical documentation, this is an investigator's dream and a prosecutor's gift. We will move fast on this. Relief and grief hit me simultaneously. Relief that someone believed me, that the system was taking this seriously. Grief that my son's suffering was so clear, so undeniable that even a seasoned CPS worker was shaken. What happens to Lily and Derek? I asked. That's up to the police and the district attorney. My job is protecting Alex. But I can tell you that what they did constitutes multiple felonies. Child abuse, child endangerment, false imprisonment. They will face consequences. That evening, 2 police detectives arrived. Detective Martinez, a man in his 50s with gray at his temples, and Detective Kim, a younger woman with sharp eyes and a gentle manner. They interviewed me for 3 hours, taking notes, recording my statement, asking questions I hadn't thought to answer. They took copies of everything. Every piece of evidence I'd collected, they duplicated and documented. When I showed them the credit card statements, Martinez's eyebrows rose. These aren't in your handwriting, he observed, examining an application I'd found in Lily's belongings. The signature is forged. And look at this email address for confirmation. It's designed to look like yours, but with a capital I instead of a lowercase l. That's sophisticated. Is that identity theft? I asked. It's felony identity theft, Kim confirmed. We're going to loop in our financial crimes unit. You said your brother-in-law worked in finance before allegedly losing his job. Yes, Derek was a financial analyst. Lily said he was laid off, but now I'm not sure what's true. Martinez and Kim exchanged looks. We'll look into his employment history, Martinez said. Identity theft and financial fraud often accompany domestic abuse cases. It's about controlling the victim's finances, their credit, their ability to leave or fight back. But this seems more elaborate than typical domestic financial abuse. This might be something bigger. The implications settled over me slowly. This wasn't just about Lily moving in and taking advantage. This was planned. Derek, with his financial expertise, had targeted me deliberately. The house, the credit cards, the systematic way they'd taken over my life, it was all calculated. We're opening a full criminal investigation, Martinez said as they prepared to leave. Child abuse, child endangerment, false imprisonment, identity theft, fraud. This is serious, Ms. Klein. You did the right thing coming forward. A lot of victims don't. After they left, I sat alone in the hotel room, Alex finally asleep in the bedroom, and tried to process everything. In less than a week, I'd gone from being a doormat who let her family walk all over her to the center of a criminal investigation that seemed to grow more complex by the hour. The investigation had officially begun. The machinery of justice was turning. There was no going back now. But the investigation would uncover something even I didn't expect: a financial scheme that spanned years. The investigation moved slowly at first, methodically. CPS interviewed Alex with a forensic specialist, a gentle woman who used dolls and drawings to help him explain what had happened. I watched through a one-way mirror, my heart breaking, as he described the quiet room and the cold punishments with a child's matter-of-fact acceptance of horror. Monica Rodriguez completed her home inspection of my house, documenting the expensive furniture Lily had purchased, the designer clothes in the closets, the receipts and credit card statements I'd found. She also inspected the hotel room where Alex and I were staying, declaring it appropriate temporary housing until the legal situation resolved. But it was the financial investigation that took the most time. Following money trails requires patient subpoenas, coordination between multiple agencies. I tried to focus on Alex, on his therapy appointments and his slow healing, but part of me was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on January 14th, 2 weeks into the new year. Detective Wilson from the Financial Crimes Unit called me at 8 in the morning. "Ms. Klein, we need to meet. I have information about your case. Can you come to the station today?" His office was small and cluttered, the walls covered with charts and timelines that meant nothing to me. He gestured for me to sit, then spread out a stack of documents across his desk like a hand of cards. "We've completed our initial investigation into the fraudulent accounts opened in your name," he said. "What we found is significantly worse than we initially thought." My stomach tightened. "How much worse?" 7 credit cards, he said, pointing to each statement in turn. "All opened between September and December, using your social security number, your date of birth, and your address. Total debt $80,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $80,000. I made $52,000 a year. It would take me years to pay that off, even if I could prove it was fraud. "But here's what concerns me," Wilson continued. "This wasn't amateur hour. Look at the sophistication." He showed me printouts of email confirmations. "The applications were submitted online, carefully timed when you were at work. The confirmation emails were routed to this address, jameikiein@gmail.com. I stared at it. It looked like my email at first glance. Then I saw it. The capital I in place of the lowercase l in Klein. "That's deliberate obfuscation," Wilson explained. "If you glanced at it quickly, you'd think it was your email. But it's a fake account set up specifically to intercept these confirmations. The purchases were strategic, too. Luxury goods that could be resold, cash advances, even a $15,000 wire transfer to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. This took planning, technical knowledge, financial expertise." "Derek," I said quietly, "that's what we think. Your sister had access to your personal information. You said she could have found old tax documents in your home office. But this level of organization, the offshore accounts, the timing, the technical details, this suggests someone with professional experience in financial systems." Wilson pulled up another file. "So we looked into Derek Williams's background. And that's where things get interesting." Derek's past unraveled like a thread pulled from a sweater. He'd been fired from his position as a financial analyst at Henderson & Associates 6 months ago, not laid off as Lily had claimed. Fired. For embezzling $45,000 from client accounts. "The firm discovered the theft during a routine audit," Wilson explained. "But Derek's boss had a soft spot for him, didn't want to ruin his career, so they made a deal. Derek would resign quietly, pay back the money, and they wouldn't press charges. Except Derek never paid back a dime, didn't have it. By the time they realized he wasn't going to make restitution, he'd already moved on. But that wasn't all. Derek was being sued by 2 former business partners for fraud related to a failed investment scheme. He owed money to multiple creditors. His credit was destroyed. By the time he showed up on my doorstep with Lily in September, he was desperate." "We think he identified you as a target," Wilson said, and the words made my skin crawl. "Good credit score, stable income, property owner. Trusting nature, you'd let family move in without question. He convinced your sister to approach you, use the temporary housing arrangement to gain access to your personal information, and executed a sophisticated fraud scheme while living under your roof." The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. Derek hadn't lost his job and needed help. He'd been fired for stealing and needed a new mark. My sister hadn't come to me out of family loyalty or desperation. She'd been the bait in a con. "Is Lily involved?" I asked. "Does she know about the fraud?" Wilson's expression suggested he'd been wondering that himself. "That's what we're trying to determine. She signed for some packages. She used some of the credit cards for purchases. But whether she understood the full scope of Derek's scheme, or whether he manipulated her into compliance, that's harder to prove." He pulled out one more document, this one showing airline reservations. "Here's where it gets really interesting. We obtained Derek's email records with a warrant. He purchased 2 one-way tickets to Mexico City departing January 30th. That's 1 week from now. 1 week. They were going to vanish in 1 week. "But wait, there's more," Wilson said grimly. "We also found evidence that Derek was attempting to take out a home equity loan on your property. He forged your signature on the application, used fake pay stubs, created false documentation. The loan was for $150,000. If it had gone through and it was close, Ms. Klein, the bank was days away from approval. He would have drained your equity and disappeared." I couldn't breathe. The magnitude of what he'd planned, what he'd nearly succeeded in doing, crushed down on me. He wasn't just stealing my credit. He was going to steal my house, my entire financial future, and vanish into another country where I'd never find him. "We estimate if you hadn't discovered the abuse when you did, if your son hadn't been found that night, Derek would have successfully stolen over $250,000 from you and disappeared within 2 weeks. You'd have been left with crushing debt, no home equity, and no way to prove what happened." Alex's suffering had saved me. The thought made me sick. If they'd been more careful with their abuse, if they'd waited until after they'd drained my accounts and left the country, I never would have known. I would have discovered the fraud weeks or months later after they were long gone. "What about Lily?" I asked again. "Did she know, was she planning to go to Mexico with him?" Wilson shrugged. "The ticket was in her name, but Derek could have lied about where they were going or why. We'll know more after we interview her. We picked them both up this morning for questioning." A small, unexpected part of me felt something like pity. Had Lily been a victim too? Had Derek manipulated her the same way he'd manipulated me, using her desperation and weakness as tools? But then I thought of Alex's face, the bruises, the rope burns, the way he'd whispered, "I'm sorry I was bad," while chained outside in freezing weather. Even if Derek had been the financial mastermind, Lily had been the one who'd hit my son, starved him, locked him in closets, chained him outside. She'd participated in the abuse willingly, eagerly even. The videos showed her laughing. Whatever victimhood Lily could claim from Derek's manipulation, it didn't erase what she'd done to a 6-year-old child. "We're charging Derek with multiple counts of identity theft fraud and attempted grand larceny," Wilson said. "And we're recommending federal charges since the scheme crosses state lines with the offshore accounts. He's looking at serious prison time." "Good," I said and meant it. "As for your sister, that's more complicated. She's complicit in the fraud, but the extent of her knowledge versus Derek's manipulation is unclear. The abuse charges are separate and more clear-cut. She'll face those regardless." I left the police station feeling strange, vindicated, angry, sad. I'd been right to suspect something was wrong, but the scope of Derek's scheme, the calculated way he'd targeted me, made me feel foolish for missing it. How many people had he done this to before? How many victims had he left in his wake? And when the police confronted Lily with this evidence, she revealed a secret that explained everything. Monica Rodriguez called me on January 18th, 4 days after my meeting with Detective Wilson. "Jamie, we need to talk about something that came up during the investigation. Can I come by?" Her tone made my stomach drop. I'd thought we were done with surprises. Alex was healing. The criminal charges against Lily and Derek were moving forward. What else could there be? Monica arrived at the hotel with a file folder and an expression I couldn't read. We sat in the small lobby area because Alex was napping in the room. During our investigation, we reviewed all family documents to verify custody relationships. She began carefully. It's standard procedure. We need to confirm who has legal standing regarding Alex, what the family structure looks like, everything. And while reviewing those documents, we found some irregularities. She opened the folder and pulled out photocopies of papers I recognized. My adoption certificate, the document my parents had shown me once when I needed it for a passport application. These papers claim you were adopted through Cascade Family Services in 1990 when you were 3 years old. But when we tried to verify the adoption, we discovered that Cascade Family Services doesn't exist, never has. There's no record of any agency by that name in Washington State, Oregon, or any surrounding state. The lobby felt suddenly cold. Maybe it closed, went out of business. That's what we thought initially, but we dug deeper. The signatures on this certificate, supposedly from a judge and a social worker, don't match any officials who were working in the county at that time. The case number doesn't exist in any court records. The seal is a forgery, and not even a good one. I stared at the papers in her hands, my papers, the documents that proved I belonged to the Klein family. "What are you saying?" Monica's voice was gentle but firm. "We had a forensic document examiner look at these. They're forgeries, Jamie. Created approximately 32 years ago, probably on a home computer. You weren't legally adopted." The words didn't make sense. I heard them understood, each one individually, but together they formed a sentence my brain couldn't process. "We brought your adoptive parents in for questioning yesterday," Monica continued. "They initially claimed these papers were handled by a family lawyer who's since died, that they lost the originals and these are copies. But when we pressed them, when we explained that falsifying adoption documents is a felony, they eventually told us the truth." The truth. My whole life I'd sensed something was wrong, something missing, some fundamental piece of my identity that didn't fit. And now I was about to learn what it was. "Your biological mother's name is Carol Bennett. In 1990, she was 26 years old and struggling with alcohol addiction following an abusive marriage. Your adoptive parents met her at an AA meeting where they volunteered as sponsors. Carol was trying to get sober, trying to be a better mother, but she knew she needed help. She asked your adoptive parents, people she trusted, people who'd supported her recovery, to care for you temporarily while she entered a 30-day inpatient rehab program." I couldn't breathe. The lobby walls seemed to be closing in. They agreed. Carol signed temporary guardianship papers thinking you'd be returned when she completed treatment. But while she was in rehab, something happened. Your adoptive mother fell in love with you. Lily had been a difficult baby, and they'd been told they couldn't have more children. They saw you as a gift, a second chance at the daughter they'd always wanted. Monica's hands tightened on the folder. When Carol completed rehab and came to get you, they refused. They told her she'd signed adoption papers, not guardianship papers. They showed her forged documents. They threatened to call the police and report her as an unfit mother trying to kidnap a child. Carol was a recovering addict with no money, no lawyer, no proof. They had a nice house, stable income, forged papers that looked official. So she left. The words, "she left," hit me like a punch. My mother, my real mother, had left me. "But that wasn't the end," Monica said quickly, seeing my face. "Your adoptive parents were afraid Carol would come back, would find a lawyer, would expose what they'd done. So they moved, packed up within 2 weeks, and relocated from Tacoma to Seattle, changed their phone number, cut off all contact with anyone who knew Carol. And they raised you as their own, except they never fully committed to it. You were always the stolen child, the one who didn't really belong, and I think they resented you for it. They resented that they'd had to commit a crime to keep you." Everything clicked into place with nauseating clarity. The lack of baby photos, the blood type that didn't match, the way they'd always treated me differently from Lily. It wasn't random cruelty. It was guilt. resentment, the cognitive dissonance of loving a child they'd stolen while hating themselves for stealing her. "There's more," Monica said quietly. "When Lily was 12, she found the forged adoption papers hidden in your father's desk. She confronted him about it. Instead of explaining or trying to repair things, he swore her to secrecy. Told her it was a family matter that couldn't be discussed. And Lily, being 12 and angry and jealous, used that information against you." I remembered being 13, Lily whispering in the hallway outside my room, "You don't belong here. You'll never really be family. They're just too nice to tell you." I'd thought she was being a bratty younger sister saying cruel things to hurt me, but she'd known. She'd known I was stolen, and she'd used it as a weapon for 20 years. "This explains everything," I whispered. "Why they never loved me the same way. Why Lily felt entitled to treat me like garbage. Why they sided with her over Alex. Because I was never really theirs." Monica reached across and squeezed my hand. "What they did to you was kidnapping Jamie. It's a crime. The statute of limitations has expired for criminal charges, but this opens up civil options. More importantly, it means your biological mother never gave up on you. She's been searching." My head snapped up. "Searching? She's looking for me. She's been looking for 32 years. When Carol came back for you and your adoptive parents showed her those forged papers, she knew something was wrong. She hired a lawyer, but lawyers cost money she didn't have. She filed missing person reports that went nowhere because the police believed the Klein family's story. She joined adoption reunion registries. She's posted on every found family website that exists. She never stopped." 32 years. My mother had been searching for me for 32 years while I grew up 10 miles away believing I was unwanted. "The investigation made local news," Monica continued. "The abuse case, the fraud charges. Carol saw an article that mentioned your name and age. She saw your photo, and she knew. She contacted us 2 days ago." The room spun. Somewhere out there was a woman who'd spent 3 decades looking for her stolen daughter. A woman who'd never given up. A woman who wanted me. But somewhere out there was a woman who'd been searching for her stolen daughter for 32 years, and the trial was about to bring us together. The kidnapping revelation consumed me for days. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, kept turning it over in my mind. My entire childhood had been built on a lie. My parents weren't my parents. My sister wasn't my sister. I'd spent 35 years trying to earn the love of people who'd stolen me. But Alex needed me focused, so I pushed the existential crisis aside. There would be time later to process my identity, to meet Carol, to untangle that mess. Right now, the custody case demanded my attention. Monica called on January 26th with news about another complication. "The court is ordering DNA testing," she said. "It's standard procedure in complex custody cases. We need to verify all family relationships establish paternity, make sure we have a complete picture." "Derek isn't Alex's father," I said immediately. "Alex was from IVF. I'm a single mother. There is no father." There was a pause. "Jamie Alex wasn't conceived through IVF. He's biologically yours, yes, we confirmed that. But there's a biological father somewhere. The DNA test will tell us if Derek Williams has any legal claim to paternity." The test was simple. A cheek swab for Alex, one for me, one for Derek. The results came back 3 days later. Monica asked me to come to her office alone. That's when I knew something was wrong. "Derek Williams is not Alex's biological father," she said, sliding the DNA report across her desk. "There's 0 genetic relation. He's not the father, not an uncle, not any blood relation whatsoever." I stared at the paper, confused. "But I told you Alex is from IVF. I used an anonymous donor. Why does this matter?" Monica's expression was strange, pitying. "Jamie, when did you use IVF? What year?" "I got pregnant in 2018. Alex was born in early 2019. She pulled out another file. "According to the birth certificate we obtained, Alex was born in March 2019, but the father listed is Derek Williams. Did you list him as the father?" "No, I left it blank. Single mother by choice, that's what I told the hospital." Monica pushed a copy of the birth certificate toward me. There, in the father's name field, was Derek's full name and signature. "Someone altered this after the fact," she said quietly. "We're still investigating how. But Jamie, there's something else. Lily has been asking to speak with you. She says there's something about Alex's paternity that she needs to explain. Would you be willing to meet with her with me present?" Every instinct screamed no, but I needed to know the truth. The meeting was held in a small conference room at the CPS offices. Lily sat across from me looking diminished. She'd lost weight. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limp around her face. She couldn't meet my eyes. "Did you know," Monica asked her directly, "that Derek isn't Alex's biological father?" Lily's hands twisted in her lap. "Yes," she whispered. "I've always known." The room went silent. Monica leaned forward. "Explain." It came out in broken pieces, a story Lily had been holding for 7 years. She'd had an affair, a brief one, barely 3 months, with a colleague at the accounting firm where she'd worked. He was married, senior partner, 20 years older than her. When she discovered she was pregnant, she panicked. She told the man, and he'd made it very clear, get an abortion or he'd destroy her career and make sure she never worked in finance again. "I couldn't do it," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "I couldn't terminate the pregnancy, but I couldn't keep it either. I was 25, broke, terrified, so I told Derek. We'd only been dating for a few months. I expected him to leave." "But he didn't," Monica prompted. "He proposed instead." Lily's voice was hollow. "He said it didn't matter that the baby wasn't his. He said he loved me, that he'd love the baby as his own. He said we could be a family. I thought he was being noble. I thought I'd found someone good." I wanted to interrupt, to scream at her, but Monica held up a hand. Let her finish. "But after we got married, after Alex was born, Derek changed. Or maybe he didn't change. Maybe I finally saw who he really was." Lily looked up at me for the first time, her eyes red and desperate. "He used Alex against me. Every time I questioned anything he did, every time I tried to say no to something, he'd remind me, 'Who stayed when you were pregnant with another man's bastard? Who gave that kid a name? Who's raising him when his real father wanted him dead? Don't forget what you owe me, Lily.'" The words hung in the air, ugly and familiar. I'd heard Derek say things like that, heard him talk to Lily in that condescending tone. I'd thought it was normal marital tension. "It was constant," Lily continued. "For 7 years. Alex wasn't a son to Derek. He was a debt I could never repay. Every time Derek looked at him, he saw my betrayal, my weakness. And when Derek started having money problems, when he got fired and needed someone to blame, Alex became the target." Monica's voice was measured. "Did Derek abuse Alex because he wasn't the biological father?" "Yes." Lily's voice broke. "He'd say things like, 'Your real father didn't want you, why should I?' He'd tell Alex he was worthless, that he only existed because I was too weak to handle my mistakes properly. And God help me, I let it happen. I participated, because I was so afraid that if I stopped him, he'd leave and I'd be alone with a child that reminded me every day of my worst choice." I felt sick. Not because I sympathized with Lily, I didn't, not really, but because Alex had spent 6 years absorbing the poison of Derek's hatred that had nothing to do with anything Alex had done and everything to do with Derek's need for control. "Your fear doesn't excuse what you did," I said, and my voice was ice. "You hit him, you starved him, you chained him outside. You didn't just stand by while Derek abused him, you actively participated. You enjoyed it. I saw the videos." Lily flinched like I'd struck her. I know there's no excuse. I know I deserve everything that's coming. I wanted you to understand why. Not to forgive me, just to understand." But understanding didn't change anything. Derek had tortured an innocent child to punish Lily for a choice she'd made before that child even existed. And Lily had joined in that torture rather than protect the victim of her own mistakes. Monica escorted Lily out, and I sat alone in that conference room trying to process what I'd learned. Derek was even more monstrous than I'd thought. He hadn't just been an abuser, he'd been a calculated sadist who'd spent 7 years slowly destroying a woman's spirit while punishing a child for existing. And Lily. She was both victim and perpetrator trapped in a cycle she'd helped create. It didn't excuse what she'd done to Alex. Nothing could excuse that. But it explained the why in a way that made the whole situation even more tragic. "What about Alex's biological father?" I asked Monica when she returned. "Does he know? Does he have any rights?" Monica's expression was grim. "That's the question, isn't it? Lily won't name him. Says she's too ashamed that he's married with a family now that revealing his identity would destroy innocent people. Without his name, we can't pursue paternity or child support. And the identity of Alex's real father. That answer would never come because Lily's secret ran deeper than anyone knew. The court wasn't satisfied with Lily's vague explanations. Judge Morrison, who'd been assigned to the custody case, made it clear during a hearing in early February that paternity mattered. "The biological father may have legal rights," she said from the bench, looking down at Lily with barely concealed frustration. "He may have obligations, child support, custody considerations. You can't simply refuse to name him because it's inconvenient." Lily sat in the defendant's chair, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. "Your Honor, my client fears retaliation. The father is a powerful man who threatened her career and her safety." "Then file for a protective order," Judge Morrison replied. "But this court needs a name. I'm ordering Ms. Klein to reveal the biological father's identity within 30 days or face contempt charges." But 30 days came and went, and Lily still refused. She accepted the contempt citation, spent a weekend in jail, and came out still silent. I didn't understand it at first. Why protect a man who'd abandoned his child? Why face legal consequences for someone who'd threatened her? Then Monica explained about the therapy sessions. As part of CPS involvement, Lily had been mandated to attend weekly therapy with a counselor who specialized in domestic violence and trauma. The sessions were confidential, but therapists are required to report certain information to the court when it affects child welfare. "Your sister finally opened up to her therapist," Monica told me during one of our regular check-ins. "She's not naming him to the court, but she told her therapist everything. And the therapist felt it was relevant to understanding Lily's mental state and decision-making. The story that emerged was sordid but painfully common. 7 years ago, Lily had been 25 and working as a junior accountant at a prestigious firm downtown. She'd been assigned to a major audit working 80-hour weeks under the supervision of a senior partner named Robert Christensen. He was 52, married with 3 children, well known in Seattle's business community. Local papers occasionally profiled him as a pillar of corporate ethics. The affair lasted 6 weeks. Long hours high, stress, a charismatic older man paying attention to a young woman desperate for validation. Lily knew it was wrong but felt powerless to stop it. When she discovered she was pregnant, she'd been terrified, but also, she admitted to her therapist, briefly hopeful. Maybe he'd leave his wife. Maybe they'd be together. Instead, Robert had taken her to an expensive lunch and laid out her options with chilling precision. "You have 2 choices," he'd told her according to what Lily remembered. "Option 1, you terminate the pregnancy quietly. I'll pay for it. We'll never speak of this again. You'll have a fine career here. Option 2, you keep it and tell people I'm the father. I'll deny everything. I'll say you made advances toward me that I rejected. I'll have you blacklisted from every accounting firm in the state. You'll never work in this field again. Your choice." Lily was 25, barely 2 years out of college, drowning in student loans. She'd believed him. Men like Robert Christensen had the power to destroy careers. She'd seen it happen to others who crossed senior partners. So she'd quit her job, claimed it was for personal reasons, and tried to figure out what to do. She couldn't afford to raise a child alone. She was terrified of telling her parents who'd always held her up as the successful daughter, the one who'd justified their treatment of me. An illegitimate child from an affair with a married man would shatter their image of her. That's when Derek entered the picture. They'd been dating casually for about 3 months. He was charming, seemed stable, worked in finance. When Lily told him she was pregnant with another man's child, she'd expected him to leave. Instead, he'd seen an opportunity. He proposed 2 days later, Monica said, reading from the therapist's notes. Told her he'd love the baby as his own, that they'd be a family, that her secret would be safe. Lily thought she'd found salvation. She didn't realize she'd found a different kind of prison. Derek had known from the beginning that Alex wasn't his biological child, but instead of that knowledge creating distance, it created leverage. Lily owed him. She owed him for staying, for giving Alex his name, for keeping her secret from her parents and the world. And Derek had spent 7 years collecting on that debt. Why did she refuse to name Robert to the court? I asked Monica. Shame, fear, and honestly, a twisted sense of protection. Lily knows that naming him would destroy his family, his wife, his 3 kids, who have no idea their father is capable of this. She says they're innocent. She won't punish them for his sins. It was the only decent impulse Lily had shown through this entire nightmare, and it frustrated me beyond measure. Robert Christensen had coerced a young employee, threatened her, abandoned his child, and faced 0 consequences. He was probably still working at that firm, still playing the ethical businessman, while Lily sat in jail for contempt, and Alex bore the scars of abuse that stemmed directly from Robert's cruelty. But after days of anger, I came to a decision. I sat in my lawyer's office and told him, I'm not pursuing Alex's biological father. I don't want his name. I don't want his money. I don't want him anywhere near my son. Thomas, my lawyer, looked surprised. Jamie, he could be liable for 7 years of child support. That's substantial money that could help with Alex's therapy, his education. I don't care, I interrupted. That man wanted Alex dead before he was born. He threatened Lily, abandoned his responsibility, and set in motion a chain of events that led to 7 years of abuse. Alex doesn't need his blood money. He doesn't need a father who'll see him as a mistake or an obligation. I leaned forward, my voice firm. Blood doesn't make family, Thomas. Love does. Action does. Showing up does. Alex's father will be whoever chooses to be there for him, whoever puts in the work to help him heal, whoever makes him feel safe and wanted. Right now, that's me. That's Mrs. Margaret. That's Carol, my biological mother, who's been more present in the last month than my adoptive parents ever were. That's his therapist, his doctors, the people who actually care about his well-being. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. You know, given everything you've learned about your own origins being taken from your biological mother, raised by people who stole you, this makes sense. You're redefining family on your own terms. He was right. I'd spent 35 years thinking biology determined belonging. But I'd been biologically unrelated to the Kleins, and they'd never made me feel like family. Carol, a woman I hadn't yet met, had spent 32 years searching for me. Mrs. Margaret, a neighbor who owed me nothing, had put herself at risk to protect Alex. That was family. That was love. Biology is just genetics, I said quietly. Family is a choice we make every day. And I choose Alex. I choose to be the parent he deserves, the one who shows up, who protects him, who teaches him that his worth isn't determined by who created him, but by who he is. Thomas made a note in his file. I'll inform the court you're not pursuing paternity identification. It'll simplify the custody case. As I left his office, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or clarity. Alex didn't need a biological father who'd rejected him. He didn't need Derek who'd abused him. He needed what every child needs: unconditional love, safety, and someone who'd fight for him without counting the cost. I was ready to be that person. I'd been becoming that person since the moment I found him chained to my porch. And I'd keep being that person long after the courts and lawyers and investigations faded into memory. But before I could think about reunions with Carol, before I could fully embrace this new understanding of family, I had to face another betrayal, one that happened in plain sight. I didn't plan to go to church that Sunday. February 7th was just another day in an endless string of meetings with lawyers, therapists, social workers. But when I woke up that morning with Alex sleeping peacefully beside me in our hotel room, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet certainty. First Baptist had been my church home for 5 years. I'd volunteered in the nursery, served at the homeless shelter, organized the Christmas toy drive. It was my community, my spiritual home. And Lily had taken so much from me already. She wasn't taking this too. Alex stayed with Carol, who'd become a fixture in our lives over the past 2 weeks. "Go," she'd said when I told her my plan. "Reclaim your space. Show them you're not ashamed because you have nothing to be ashamed of." I walked into the sanctuary at 10:15, wearing a simple blue dress, my head high. Eyes turned toward me. Whispers rippled through the pews. The Klein family scandal had made local news. Everyone knew. They knew about the abuse, the fraud, the investigation. They knew my parents had somehow been involved. But knowing facts and understanding them are different things. Pastor Williams saw me from the pulpit where he was reviewing notes. His face lit up and he gave me a small nod. He'd called me twice in the past 2 weeks, offering support, asking what the church could do to help. I'd told him I needed time. Now, apparently, time was up. I took a seat near the back next to Mrs. Margaret, who squeezed my hand. The service began normally. Opening hymns, scripture reading. But during the announcements section before Pastor Williams could begin his sermon, there was movement near the front. Lily stood up. Lily stood. She was dressed immaculately in a cream-colored dress suit, her hair professionally styled, her makeup perfect. She looked like a woman wronged, a martyr preparing to bare her soul. My stomach tightened, but I didn't move. "Pastor Williams' congregation, I apologize for the interruption," Lily said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "But I need to ask for your prayers during this difficult time." Pastor Williams looked uncomfortable. "Lily, perhaps this is something we could discuss privately." "No," she interrupted, tears already forming in her eyes. "I need this community to know the truth. My sister has made terrible accusations against my husband and me. She's trying to destroy our family, trying to take away my opportunity to be a mother figure to her son. I just want people to know the truth. I love that boy like my own. I would never hurt him. Never." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Heads turned toward me. My parents, sitting in their usual third-row pew, nodded sympathetically at Lily. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my face calm. I'd prepared for this. Some part of me had known Lily would try something like this, would attempt to control the narrative, to paint herself as the victim. Pastor Williams tried again. "Lily, this is a serious legal matter best handled outside of worship. I think we should—" "Pastor's right," I said, standing smoothly. My voice carried through the sanctuary clear and strong. "This is a serious matter, and people should know the truth." I walked down the aisle, slowly carrying the manila folder I'd brought specifically for this possibility. Every eye in the church followed me. Lily's face went from victorious to uncertain as I approached. "You're absolutely right, Lily," I said when I reached the front. "People should know the truth about how you love Alex." I opened the folder and pulled out a single photograph, the one Dr. Chen had taken the day after Christmas. Alex in his hospital bed, his small body covered in bruises, rope burns visible on his wrists, the hospital identification bracelet clear on his tiny arm. I held it up so the congregation could see. The gasp was collective, horrified. Someone in the back said, "Oh my God." Another voice, "That's a child." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply stated facts in that same clear, steady voice. "This is what love looks like to my sister. This is my 6-year-old son the morning after I found him chained to my porch railing in 3-degree weather while Lily hosted a champagne party inside my house. The house I own. The house she'd taken over. The house she was using my stolen credit cards to furnish. Lily tried to speak. Jamie, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I turned to face the congregation. For 3 months, while I worked double shifts to provide for my son, my sister and her husband systematically abused him. They hit him, starved him, locked him in closets for hours, and they did it because they enjoyed it. I have video evidence, medical reports, police documentation. I handed the folder to Pastor Williams, whose face had gone pale. Inside is documentation of 3 months of systematic abuse, medical reports from specialists, statements from witnesses, a police report detailing criminal charges. I'm not asking this congregation to choose sides in a family dispute. I'm asking you to pray for justice not for me, but for every child suffering in silence while adults look away. The silence in the sanctuary was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. I walked back toward my seat, but my parents chose that moment to stand preparing to slip out the side exit. They couldn't face this. They were going to run away just like they'd always run away from anything uncomfortable. Mrs. Margaret moved faster than I'd ever seen a 72-year-old woman move. She stepped into the aisle, blocking their path, her voice ringing out loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't you dare walk away from what you enabled. My father tried to brush past her. This is none of your concern. You saw that boy being abused and did nothing. Margaret's voice shook with righteous fury. I told you what I heard. You walked through that house, heard him crying, and you told me to mind my own business. You stood by while your grandson suffered. Don't you dare pretend you're innocent. The congregation erupted in whispers. Shocked faces turned toward my parents, who stood frozen in the aisle. Is that true? Someone called out. You knew? My mother's carefully constructed facade crumbled. It's not what it sounds like. We didn't know it was serious, Lily said. Lily said it wasn't serious, Margaret interrupted. So you chose to believe your daughter, who was living in a house she stole, spending money she didn't have, rather than trust your eyes and ears when a child was crying for help. Pastor Williams finally found his voice. I think we need to pause the service. Everyone please take a moment for silent prayer while we... But people were already moving. A dozen church members approached me, their faces filled with concern and support. Mrs. Thompson, who'd worked with me in the nursery, hugged me tightly. I had no idea. Jamie, I'm so sorry. What can we do? Mr. Davis, one of the deacons, approached Lily, where she still stood near the pulpit, frozen and pale. I think you need to leave. This isn't your place anymore. Lily looked around wildly, seeking support, finding none. Even my parents had been abandoned by their social circle. People who'd been their friends for decades looked at them with disgust and disappointment. Pastor Williams asked me to wait after the service ended early. In his office, he said, Jamie, I owe you an apology. I've known your family for years. I should have looked deeper, should have asked harder questions. You couldn't have known, I said. They were very good at hiding it. The church wants to help. Therapy costs, legal fees, whatever you need. I nodded, accepting the offer with grace I hadn't known I possessed. As I left the church with Margaret, dozens of people promised to pray for us to help however they could. The community I'd feared losing had instead embraced me, believed me, stood with me. But Lily's public humiliation was just the beginning, because someone had been watching who could make everything worse. The church confrontation felt like a victory, but it was hollow. Yes, the community had rallied behind me. Yes, Lily had been publicly exposed. But the question that kept gnawing at me was, how had this gone on for so long without anyone stopping it? The answer came on February 15th when Detective Martinez called me to the station. We've been interviewing witnesses, he said, sliding a transcript across the desk. Mrs. Margaret's statement. You need to read this. Margaret had been thorough in her interview. She'd documented everything she'd observed over the past months, the crying, the locked doors, the times she'd seen Alex sitting alone on the porch in the cold. But one detail made my blood run cold. On December 10th, 2 weeks before that terrible Christmas Eve, my parents had visited the house. Margaret had seen their car in my driveway, watched them go inside, stay for about 30 minutes, then leave. She'd been concerned enough about the sounds coming from my house that she'd approached them as they were getting into their car. According to the transcript, Margaret had said, "Excuse me, Mr. and Mrs. Klein. I don't mean to intrude, but I'm worried about young Alex. I hear him crying for hours at a time. Have you noticed anything concerning—" My mother's response documented in Margaret's precise recall. "Lily is just strict. Children today are too coddled. A little discipline never hurt anyone." But Margaret had pressed. "I heard him locked in a room yesterday crying for help, for over 3 hours. That's when my father had cut in his voice firm. "Family matters, stay in the family, Mrs. Margaret. We'd appreciate your discretion." I read the transcript 3 times, my hands shaking. They knew. They'd been in that house. They'd heard Alex crying, and they'd walked away. "Why?" I asked Martinez, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Families like yours concerned with image, reputation, social standing often protect the abuser over the victim to avoid scandal. They probably told themselves it wasn't that bad, that Lily was just being strict like they said, that it was none of their business." "But it was their grandson." "I know." Martinez's voice was gentle. But admitting what was happening would have meant acknowledging their daughter was an abuser. It would have meant family drama, police involvement, community gossip. So they chose willful blindness. And legally, their failure to report child abuse when they had direct knowledge makes them complicit. He paused, then added quietly, "Your parents didn't just fail you as a child when they took you from your biological mother. They failed your son when they could have saved him from 3 more weeks of torture." CPS arranged a mediated meeting. My parents, their lawyer, Monica Rodriguez, a court recorder. Everything would be documented, potentially used in legal proceedings. My parents looked smaller somehow sitting across the conference table. My mother's hands twisted in her lap. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked just one question: why? My mother started immediately with excuses. "We didn't think it was serious, Jamie. Lily said Alex was just being difficult, that he was manipulative, that he played up his emotions when adults were around. We didn't want to cause family drama over different discipline tactics." "You heard him crying for help." My voice was ice. "Margaret told you he was locked in a room for hours. You walked through that house. You heard him, and you walked away because acknowledging what was happening would be inconvenient." "That's not fair," my father started. "You're not parents," I interrupted. "Parents protect children. You're cowards who chose reputation over a 6-year-old's safety. You stole me from a mother who loved me, then stood by while your daughter tortured my son. You're not family. You're strangers who've caused nothing but pain." I stood gathering my things. Monica watched silently, the court recorder typing steadily. "Stay away from my son." I said my final words, measured and absolute. "Stay away from me. You're dead to me. Both of you. Forever." I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Behind me, my mother was crying. I didn't care. But as my adoptive family crumbled, someone from my past was about to step forward, the mother who never gave up searching. After I walked out on my adoptive parents, I felt unmoored. Cutting them off was the right decision, but it left me without any family except Alex. No siblings, no parents, no extended relatives who'd stood by me. Just me and my son against the world. Or so I thought. In late February, I returned to my house for the first time since Christmas. Lily and Derek were gone, evicted by court order. The house was a disaster, dirty dishes piled in the sink, trash everywhere, furniture damaged. But more importantly, my adoptive parents had cleared out their belongings in a hurry after the church incident, leaving behind boxes of papers they'd stored in my garage. I was going through these boxes looking for any documents that might be relevant to the custody case when I found it. A yellowed envelope addressed to the Klein family, postmarked September 1993. It had never been opened. My hands shook as I carefully tore it open, the old glue giving way easily after 32 years. The letter inside was written on lined notebook paper in careful, looping handwriting. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Klein, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to ask about my daughter Jamie. It's been 3 years since you took her, and I haven't stopped thinking about her for a single day. I know you showed me papers saying I signed away my rights, but something has always felt wrong about that. I've been to lawyers, but they say there's nothing I can do without money for a proper investigation. I'm sober now. I've been sober for 3 years. I've completed treatment, found steady work, and built a stable life. I'm not asking to take her back. I know that ship has sailed. But please, I'm begging you, just let me know she's okay. Send me a photo. Tell me she's healthy and happy. Tell me she has a good life. I think about her every single day. If you won't let me see her, at least let me know she's alive. I'll never stop looking for her. Signed, Carol Bennett. At the bottom was a P.O. box in Portland, Oregon, and a phone number that was probably disconnected decades ago. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. My biological mother had written to them, begged for just a photo, and they'd never even opened it. They'd thrown it in a box with old tax documents and forgotten it existed. On impulse, I grabbed my laptop and Googled Carol Bennett missing daughter. The results made me gasp. Profile after profile on reunion registries, missing persons forums, adoption search websites, all with the same information. Searching for daughter Jamie, born March 15, 1987, last seen 1990 in Tacoma, WA. Brown hair, hazel eyes, birthmark on left shoulder blade. Taken during my recovery. If you have any information, please contact me. I unconsciously touched my left shoulder blade where I'd always had a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. She remembered. She'd remembered that tiny detail for 32 years. The posts spanned decades. The earliest was from 1995 on an old forum that looked like it hadn't been updated since the internet's early days. The most recent was from January 2025, just weeks ago. She'd never stopped searching. While I'd grown up believing I was unwanted, a burden my adoptive parents had heroically taken on, there had been a woman out there desperately trying to find me. A woman who'd spent 3 decades posting on every website, joining every registry, never giving up hope. Then I remembered weeks ago my lawyer had advised me to set up Google alerts for my name in case Lily tried to spread lies online or the case generated negative press I should know about. On March 1st, I got a hit. A local news article had been published, Seattle Mother Fights for Custody After Alleged Abuse by Sister. The article mentioned my name, my age, and basic details of the case. The next morning, an email appeared in my inbox forwarded by my lawyer with the subject line, "You need to see this." Dear Ms. Klein, my name is Carol Bennett. I believe I am your biological mother. I've been searching for you for 32 years. I saw the news article about your custody case. I'm in Seattle now. I moved here 5 years ago, still hoping. I understand if you don't want contact. I understand if you're angry. But please, if there's any chance, I'd like to meet you. I just want to know you're okay. I never stopped loving you. Carol. I stared at the email on my screen, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to process that the mother I'd been told abandoned me had actually spent 3 decades searching. And 3 days later, I sat across from the woman who'd spent 3 decades searching for her stolen child. Meeting Carol was overwhelming in ways I hadn't expected. She looked like an older version of me. Same hazel eyes, same auburn hair, now threaded with gray. Same nervous habit of tucking hair behind her left ear. We'd met at a quiet coffee shop, both of us crying before we even said hello. But that story deserves its own telling. Right now, I had to focus on the emergency custody hearing scheduled for March 15th, my 35th birthday. The universe had a twisted sense of timing. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, wood-paneled and formal with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Judge Patricia Morrison presided from an elevated bench, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. My lawyer, Thomas Brennan, had warned me, "She doesn't tolerate games. Just tell the truth and let the evidence speak. I sat at the plaintiff's table, Thomas beside me, his briefcase full of documentation we'd spent weeks compiling. Across the aisle, Lily sat with her public defender, a young man who looked overwhelmed. Derek wasn't there. He'd been arrested by the FBI the week before and was in federal custody awaiting trial. Lily looked diminished, her designer clothes replaced by a plain gray dress, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I felt no satisfaction seeing her like this. Only grim determination to protect my son. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and we stood as Judge Morrison entered. The hearing moved quickly. Monica Rodriguez took the stand first, presenting CPS findings with clinical precision. The evidence shows systematic abuse over approximately 3 months. Medical documentation confirms chronic malnutrition, healed fractures, rope burns, and signs of prolonged psychological trauma. However, since being placed in Ms. Jamie Klein's full-time care, the child has gained 6 pounds, begun sleeping through the night without nightmares, and is responding positively to trauma therapy. He expresses no desire for contact with Lily Klein or Derek Williams. Thomas presented the hidden camera footage, next edited down to 5 minutes of the most damning clips. Even Judge Morrison, known for her stoicism, winced when Lily's voice came through the speakers. "Lick it up like the animal you are." "Mrs." Margaret testified, her voice breaking as she described finding Alex chained outside her regret at not acting sooner. "I've lived with similar regret for 20 years, she said. "I won't fail another child." Lily's public defender tried to argue extenuating circumstances. Lily's own history of domestic violence, Derek's manipulation, mental health struggles. But when pressed to explain the videos, the medical evidence, the systematic nature of the abuse, he had nothing. "My client recognizes she made serious mistakes and is willing to undergo counseling anger management." "This wasn't a mistake," Judge Morrison interrupted. "Mistakes are accidental. This was deliberate, repeated, and documented." The judge called a 20-minute recess to review materials. When she returned, her ruling was swift and unambiguous. Temporary full custody is awarded to Jamie Klein pending final trial. Lily Klein may request supervised visitation, though the child's therapist will determine if such contact is therapeutically appropriate. A restraining order is hereby issued. Ms. Lily Klein and Mr. Derek Williams are prohibited from any contact with the minor child outside of court. Approved supervised visits. Furthermore, Ms. Lily Klein must vacate the property at 847 Maple Street within 72 hours. The Sheriff's Department will enforce this order if necessary. A home study of Ms. Jamie Klein's current residence will be conducted within 2 weeks. Final custody trial is scheduled for May 17th. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. It wasn't over, the final trial still loomed, but this was victory. Alex was officially, legally mine. Lily couldn't touch him. Thomas squeezed my shoulder. "Good start," he whispered. Outside the courtroom, I called Carol, who'd been watching Alex. "We won," I said, my voice breaking. "Of course you did," Carol replied. Truth always wins eventually. But 72 hours came and went, and my house still held my tormentors. Lily's refusal to vacate became a legal headache. The Sheriff's Department had to physically escort her out on the 4th day while she screamed about her rights and injustice. But that battle paled in comparison to what came next. Late March, Thomas called with news about the final trial preparations. "Judge Morrison is ordering a forensic interview with Alex. It's standard procedure for children this young with severe trauma. The interview will be recorded and presented at trial instead of making him testify in person." The appointment was scheduled for March 28th at a facility that specialized in child abuse cases. When we arrived, I was struck by how normal it looked, like a preschool with bright colors and toys scattered around. Nothing about it said place where children describe nightmares. Dr. Lisa Hammond met us in the waiting room. She was maybe 40, with kind eyes and a gentle voice that immediately put Alex at ease. "Hi, Alex, I'm Dr. Lisa. I heard you like elephants." Alex nodded shyly, clutching Mr. Trunks, his stuffed elephant that had been his constant companion since Christmas. "Mr. Trunks can come with us," Dr. Hammond said. She turned to me. "Mom, you'll watch from the observation room. We have a therapist on standby if you need support." They led me to a small room with a one-way mirror and a video monitor. My therapist, Dr. Stevens, sat beside me. "Remember what we talked about," she said quietly. "This will be hard, but Alex needs to tell his story, and you need to hear it so you can help him heal." Through the monitor, I watched Dr. Hammond settle Alex into a beanbag chair in a room painted soft blue with toys and art supplies scattered around. She sat on the floor with him, casual and non-threatening. "Alex, do you know why you're here today?" "To talk about Aunt Lily," he said, his voice so small. "That's right. And I want you to know you're not in trouble. Nothing you say will get you in trouble, okay?" He nodded. "Can you tell me about times when Aunt Lily made you sad?" Alex's small fingers twisted in Mr. Trunk's worn fabric. "She got mad when I was noisy. She said I was bad like my mommy, so she had to fix me." I flinched at those words. Bad like my mommy. Lily had poisoned him against me. Dr. Hammond handed Alex paper and crayons. "Can you draw me a picture of a time Aunt Lily made you sad?" Alex drew carefully a stick figure boy in a small dark space. "This is the quiet room. I had to stay there when I was bad. Sometimes all day." He added tears to the stick figure's face. "It was really dark. I couldn't see anything." "What happened on the night when it was very cold outside?" Alex's eyes filled with tears. His voice got even smaller. "Derek! He's not my daddy!" Aunt Lily said. "Derek said I cried too loud when they had friends over. He put the doggy chain on me on my arm." He touched his wrist where the rope burns had been. "Aunt Lily said, maybe the cold will teach you to shut up. I tried to be quiet, but I was so cold. I thought I was going to die like the bird we found once." In the observation room, I pressed my hand over my mouth to muffle my sobs. Dr. Stevens squeezed my shoulder, but said nothing. "Did you think anyone would help you?" Dr. Hammond asked gently. Alex shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Aunt Lily said if I told Mommy she'd send me away forever because I'm bad. She said Mommy doesn't love me anymore. That's why she leaves me with them." My heart shattered. He'd thought I didn't love him. He'd thought he deserved it. "But Mrs. Margaret gave me the camera button," Alex continued, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "She said if scary things happen, push it. So I did. I pushed it lots." He'd recorded his own torture, hoping someone would finally see. A 6-year-old child documenting abuse, never giving up hope that someone would save him. And that video would seal Lily's fate, but Derek's reckoning would come even sooner. The meeting was scheduled for March 4th, 3 days after Carol's email. We chose a quiet coffee shop in Fremont, away from downtown, crowd somewhere neutral where neither of us had memories. I arrived 15 minutes early, too nervous to wait at the hotel. I ordered tea I couldn't drink and sat by the window, my hands shaking around the warm cup. What do you say to the mother who spent 32 years searching for you? What do you say to someone who's a stranger but should have been everything? When Carol walked through the door at exactly 2 o'clock, I recognized her instantly. Not from memory. I'd been too young when she lost me to remember her face. I recognized her from my mirror. She had the same hazel eyes that shifted between green and brown depending on the light. The same auburn hair, though hers was threaded with silver and cut shorter than mine. The same narrow face with high cheekbones. And when she nervously tucked her hair behind her left ear, the same gesture I'd done unconsciously my whole life, I knew without a doubt, this was my mother. We were both crying before we even said hello. Carol sat across from me, her hands reaching halfway across the table before pulling back, uncertain if touch was welcome. "I can't believe it's really you," she whispered. "I've imagined this moment 10,000 times, but I never really believed it would happen." "I didn't know you existed," I said, my voice breaking. "They told me they never told me anything. I just thought I was adopted by strangers, that my birth mother didn't want me. I never stopped wanting you." Carol opened the canvas bag she'd brought, her hands shaking. "I kept everything. I couldn't let go. Everyone said I should move on, that you were gone, but I couldn't. I wouldn't." She pulled out a photo album, its cover worn from years of handling. Inside were pictures of infant me hospital photos with dates and times written in neat handwriting, photos of a tiny baby in Carol's arms, her face so young and full of joy. Photos of my first birthday, a small celebration with a homemade cake. Photos of a toddler with auburn curls laughing at something off camera. "I took so many pictures," Carol said, turning pages slowly. "I wanted to document everything, so when I got better, when I got you back, I could show you all the moments we'd missed together." She'd saved toys too. She explained my first teddy bear, a baby blanket she'd crocheted herself, my hospital bracelet from birth. They were all in a storage unit she'd maintained for 32 years, paying the monthly fee religiously, even when she could barely afford food. Carol also brought documents. The temporary guardianship papers she'd signed, clearly labeled 30-day temporary care agreement at the top, with her signature dated October 1990. Her rehab completion certificate dated November 1990, just 30 days later. And copies of missing person reports she'd filed in 1991, 1992, 1995, all dismissed by police because the Klein family had shown them legal adoption papers. "I knew something was wrong," Carol said, her finger tracing the guardianship agreement. "This clearly says temporary, but when I came to get you, they showed me different papers that looked official, that said I'd signed away my rights. I didn't remember signing anything like that, but I'd been so sick, so desperate to get clean, I thought maybe I had and couldn't remember." She'd tried to fight it. Contacted lawyers who wanted retainers she couldn't afford, filed reports with police who believed the stable family over the recovering addict. Eventually defeated and broke, she'd accepted that legal channels were closed to her. "But I never stopped looking," Carol said firmly. "I joined every reunion registry. I posted on every adoption search website. I Googled your name once a month for 32 years, Jamie Klein, born March 15, 1987. When that news article appeared about the custody case, I saw your photo and I knew. I'd know your face anywhere. You look just like your grandmother." "How did you find me so quickly?" I asked. "I'd been checking Google alerts for Jamie Klein and born 1987 for years," she admitted. "When the article appeared, I got the alert within hours. I called my old lawyer the same day. She helped me contact your legal team." Carol reached across the table, her hand hovering over mine, asking permission. I took it, and her fingers wrapped around mine with fierce tenderness. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you," she whispered. "I'm so sorry they stole your childhood, that you grew up thinking you weren't wanted. You were wanted, Jamie. You were loved. Every single day for 32 years you were loved." I couldn't speak through my tears. I just held her hand, this woman who was a stranger but felt like coming home. "I'm here now," Carol said. "If you'll have me. I know I can't replace the years we lost, but I want to be part of your life, part of Alex's life. I want to be the mother I should have been." "I've been looking for you too," I managed to say. "I just didn't know it." But our reunion would have to wait, because the next day, Derek's world came crashing down. That first meeting with Carol lasted 3 hours. We talked, cried, looked through photos, and began the slow, careful process of learning each other. When we finally said goodbye, promising to meet again soon, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. The next morning, March 8th, Detective Wilson called at 7 a.m. "We got him," he said, satisfaction clear in his voice. "FBI arrested Derek Williams an hour ago. Thought you'd want to know." The FBI had completed their investigation into Derek's financial crimes. The charges were staggering: in scope wire fraud, 7 counts, 1 for each credit card application he'd submitted using my information. Identity theft, 12 counts covering each fraudulent transaction over $1,000. Aggravated identity theft, 2 counts, a federal offense that carried a mandatory 2-year prison sentence because he'd used my identity in connection with felony fraud. But what made my blood run cold was what they'd discovered about his endgame. Derek had purchased one-way tickets to Mexico City for January 30th, just 5 days after I would have found Alex frozen if Margaret hadn't called me. He'd opened an offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands, and most damning, he'd been in the final stages of forging documents to take out a home equity loan on my house for $150,000. If you hadn't discovered the abuse when you did, Detective Wilson explained, Derek would have successfully stolen over $200,000 from you and disappeared to a country with no extradition treaty. You'd have been left with crushing debt, no home equity, destroyed credit, and no way to prove what happened. The arrest itself became local news spectacle. FBI agents had surrounded Derek's apartment at 6 a.m. When they knocked and announced themselves, Derek had done the unthinkable. He'd run. A neighbor's security camera captured everything. Derek, still in his pajamas, bolting out the back door of his ground-floor apartment, sprinting across the yard. 3 FBI agents in tactical gear pursuing him. The tackle that brought him down face first into the grass, his wrists being cuffed behind his back, while he shouted about his rights and false arrest. The video went viral by noon. Local news ran it on loop with headlines like, "Financial fraudster flees FBI in pajamas," and "Seattle man arrested in elaborate identity theft scheme." The comments sections filled with people recognizing him from earlier reports about the child abuse case. The court of public opinion was swift and brutal. That afternoon, Derek appeared before a federal magistrate for his bail hearing. I attended, sitting in the back row of the courtroom, wanting to see his face when he realized he wasn't getting out. The federal prosecutor was a stern woman in her 50s who laid out the case with devastating precision. "Your Honor, the defendant is an extreme flight risk. He had purchased tickets to flee the country. He established offshore accounts. He has no ties to this community, no legitimate employment, and faces decades in federal prison if convicted. Additionally, he poses a danger to witnesses. There's a pending child abuse case against his wife in which the defendant is implicated. The primary witness is a 6-year-old child. We request the defendant be held without bail." Derek's public defender tried to argue for house arrest with an ankle monitor, but his heart wasn't in it. He'd seen the evidence. He knew Derek was guilty. The magistrate's ruling took less than 5 minutes. "Bail is denied. The defendant will be remanded to federal custody pending trial." Derek's face went white. He'd expected to post bail to go home to prepare his defense from the comfort of an apartment. Instead, he was going straight to a federal detention center. In late April, facing overwhelming evidence, Derek took a plea deal. 8 years in federal prison, $80,000 in restitution to me, permanent ban from working in any financial services capacity, no possibility of parole in the federal system. Thomas called me the day the plea was finalized. "This is good for your custody case," he explained. Derek's guilty plea becomes evidence in Lily's trial. It proves the fraud happened, proves it was systematic, proves she benefited from it even if she claims ignorance. Lily's lawyer tried to spin Derek's arrest as proof that Lily was also a victim manipulated, controlled, coerced. But the prosecution's response was damning. She lived in that house. She accepted the benefits of the fraud, the designer clothes, the expensive parties, the luxury lifestyle. She participated actively and enthusiastically in child abuse. Being manipulated doesn't erase choices. She chose to hurt a child, repeatedly. Derek's arrest left Lily completely isolated. Her husband was in federal prison facing 8 years. Her parents had been publicly shamed and were refusing to support her openly. Her friends had abandoned her after the church incident. She had no one. And in her isolation, Lily made one last desperate play, one that would backfire spectacularly. With Derek in federal custody and the preliminary custody hearing decided in my favor, the court ordered a mediation session in early April. Judge Morrison's clerk explained it was standard procedure, one last attempt to reach a settlement before going to full trial. "The system prefers resolution over litigation when children are involved," she said. "I didn't want mediation. I wanted a trial, a public record, consequences that couldn't be negotiated away." But Thomas advised cooperation. "It shows good faith. And honestly, Jamie, If Lily offers a strong enough plea deal, you might want to consider it. Trials are brutal, especially when children are involved. The mediation was held in a conference room at the courthouse on April 3rd. A neutral mediator, a retired judge named Howard Green, presided. Thomas sat beside me, his files stacked neatly. Across the table, Lily sat with her public defender Marcus Chen, a young lawyer who looked like he wished he was anywhere else. Lily looked terrible. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose. Her hair, usually perfect, was pulled back in a messy bun. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Judge Green explained the process. We'd each present our position, discuss possible settlements, see if we could avoid trial. Remember, mediation is about finding middle ground. Both parties will need to compromise. But there was no middle ground between what Lily had done and what justice required. Marcus started with the standard defense strategy. Lily was a victim of Derek's manipulation. She'd suffered domestic violence. She needed treatment, not punishment. She was willing to undergo therapy and anger management. My client recognizes she made serious mistakes and wants to make amends. Lily interrupted him. Stop. Lily, we discussed. I said stop. Her voice broke. I can't do this anymore. She looked at me directly for the first time since we'd entered the room. Her eyes were red, her face crumpling. I did it, she said. I hurt Alex. I let Derek hurt Alex. I knew it was wrong and I did it anyway. Marcus tried to intervene. Lily, you don't have to say anything right now. But she continued, the words tumbling out like a dam breaking. Derek said if I didn't help him, he'd expose the affair, destroy my reputation, leave me with nothing. He said Alex wasn't even mine to care about, that he was Jamie's mistake, her burden. He said I was doing her a favor by toughening him up, teaching him discipline she was too weak to enforce. I was so afraid of losing everything that I became a monster. The room was silent except for her ragged breathing. He controlled everything, Lily continued through sobs. My phone, my money, where I went. The first time I said I wanted to stop hurting Alex, that he was just a little boy who didn't deserve it. Derek locked me in the bedroom. For 18 hours. No food, no water, couldn't even use the bathroom. He said, "This is what happens when you question me." After that, I just complied. I did whatever he wanted because I was more afraid of him than I was ashamed of myself. Marcus was trying to salvage something from this confession, turning it into a narrative of domestic violence and coercion. Your Honor, you see. My client was also a victim. No. My voice cut through the room cold and clear. She was a victim of Derek. She made Alex a victim of herself. I looked at Lily. I understand what it's like to be afraid of the people who should love you. I spent 35 years being controlled, diminished, made to feel worthless by my family. But I never hurt a child. I never took my pain and inflicted it on someone innocent. Your trauma doesn't justify my son's trauma. Judge Green tried to redirect the conversation toward settlement options, but there was nowhere to go. Lily's lawyer offered a plea deal, guilty to reduced charges, probation, mandatory therapy, no prison time. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, refused immediately. The abuse was too severe, too systematic, too well documented. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was 3 months of torture. The state will not accept probation. Judge Green turned to me. Ms. Klein, you have input here. Would you accept a plea deal if the terms included some prison time? Thomas looked at me, waiting. This was my decision. No, I said. We're going to trial. Jamie, Thomas started. The world needs to hear what she did. I continued, my voice steady. Other Lilies need to see that there are consequences. Other Alexes need to know they'll be believed. This goes to trial. Lily's face crumpled. Marcus whispered urgently to her, probably about trial strategy, about the years of prison she was facing, about how this was her last chance for mercy. But I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even triumph. Just an absolute, unshakable resolve. As we left the conference room, Thomas said quietly, "You know this trial will be public. Every detail will come out. It'll be hard on Alex, hard on you." "I know," I said. "But some things are more important than comfort." But Lily had one more card to play, one that would test my principles more than anything else. The weeks after the failed mediation were spent preparing for trial. Thomas and I met daily, going over testimony, reviewing evidence, anticipating defense strategies. Alex continued therapy, slowly healing but still fragile. Carol had become a constant presence, helping with childcare, offering support I'd never had from the parents who'd stolen me. Then on April 28th, 3 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, Marcus filed an emergency motion. Thomas called me immediately. "Lily's claiming she's pregnant. She's requesting a trial delay due to medical complications from stress." The motion included a doctor's note confirming an 8-week pregnancy. Within hours, the news had leaked to media outlets. By evening, my phone was flooded with notifications as articles proliferated across social media. Pregnant woman faces prison in child abuse case. Should expectant mothers be jailed? Sister versus sister when family disputes endanger the unborn. The comment sections became battlegrounds. Some people argued Lily deserved mercy, that sending a pregnant woman to prison was cruel, that the unborn baby shouldn't suffer for her mistakes. Others countered that pregnancy wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card, that abusers shouldn't be able to use pregnancy as a shield. I received hate mail. Actual letters sent to my lawyer's office, forwarded to me with warnings to document everything for potential harassment charges. "You're going to ruin a baby's life before it's even born. You're as bad as she is. That baby is innocent. How can you call yourself a mother while destroying another woman's child? I hope karma catches up to you for what you're doing to that pregnant woman." I read each one, let the words wash over me, and felt nothing. These strangers didn't know what Alex had suffered. They saw a pregnant woman and assumed victim. They didn't see the hidden camera footage. They hadn't heard Alex's broken voice describing the quiet room. The emergency hearing was scheduled for May 5th. Judge Morrison, clearly annoyed at the delay tactic, moved it to the top of her docket. The courtroom was packed. Media had caught wind of the pregnancy angle and sensationalized it. I sat beside Thomas, my face calm, while Lily sat across the aisle, one hand protectively on her still flat stomach. Judge Morrison got straight to the point. "Ms. Klein, you claim to be 8 weeks pregnant and request a trial delay. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Lily said, her voice small and tremulous. "Who is the father of this child?" Lily's face went white. Marcus whispered something to her, but Judge Morrison cut him off. "Answer the question, Ms. Klein. Who is the father?" "Someone I met after Derek was arrested." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Clarify. Your husband has been in federal custody since March 8th. You are now 8 weeks pregnant. The timeline suggests conception in mid-March. Correct?" "Yes," Lily whispered. Jennifer Walsh, the prosecutor, stood immediately. "Your Honor, may I question the witness?" Judge Morrison nodded. Jennifer approached Lily with the precision of a surgeon. "Ms. Klein, to be absolutely clear, while awaiting trial for systematic child abuse while your husband was in federal custody for fraud, while your nephew, the child you tortured, was undergoing trauma therapy, you engaged in a relationship with someone else." "I was lonely," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "Derek was gone. I was all alone. I made a mistake." "A mistake," Jennifer repeated flatly. She turned to the jury, though this wasn't the trial jury, just observers. The defendant wasn't focused on rehabilitation. She wasn't focused on understanding the harm she caused. She wasn't preparing to take responsibility. She was dating. Marcus objected. "Your Honor, my client's personal life goes to her character and priorities," Jennifer interrupted. "It shows someone who isn't remorseful, who isn't focused on making amends, who is concerned primarily with herself." The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Even some of the people who'd come to support Lily looked uncomfortable. Thomas passed me a note. "This is backfiring on her badly." Judge Morrison's face was stone. "Ms. Klein, pregnancy does not exempt you from facing trial. It does not dismiss the charges against you. If convicted, you will receive appropriate prenatal care and custody. Motion for trial delay is denied. We proceed as scheduled on May 17th. That evening, Thomas drafted a statement that I approved, and he released to media, "I'm concerned for any child in Lily Klein's care, born or unborn. Pregnancy doesn't erase what she did to my son. It doesn't undo months of systematic abuse. If anything, it reinforces exactly why I'm fighting to ensure no child, including this unborn baby, grows up in an environment where abuse is tolerated or excused. This isn't about revenge. This has never been about revenge. It's about protection. It's about making sure that what happened to Alex never happens to another child." The public response shifted. The sympathy Lily had tried to manufacture evaporated. People saw through the manipulation. But even as her lies unraveled, my parents made one last attempt to rewrite the narrative. Lily's pregnancy announcement had been her desperate attempt to garner sympathy. It failed. But as the trial date of May 17th loomed closer, another attempted manipulation emerged from an unexpected source. On May 1st, I woke to dozens of text messages and missed calls. My phone had been relatively quiet since I'd blocked most numbers after the hate mail started, but these were from people I hadn't heard from in years, distant relatives, old colleagues, people from the church. "Saw your parents' post. So brave of them to apologize publicly. Your mom and dad are showing real courage. Family healing is so important. Praying for reconciliation in your family." I didn't understand until Margaret called. "Jamie, you need to see what they posted on Facebook." I didn't have Facebook anymore. I deleted it months ago to avoid the constant notifications and comments about the case. But Margaret sent me screenshots. My adoptive parents had published an open letter posted at 6 that morning addressed, "To our community and friends." The letter was perfectly crafted, hitting every emotional note. "We are heartbroken by the recent rift in our family. As parents, we have made mistakes in how we handled concerns about our grandson Alex, and for that, we are deeply, truly sorry. We were trying to keep our family together during a difficult time and didn't fully realize the severity of the situation. We should have acted differently, and we regret that our inaction caused harm. We love both of our daughters and our precious grandson deeply. We are committed to learning from this experience and being better grandparents and parents. We ask for forgiveness, understanding, and privacy as we work to heal as a family. Family is everything, and we hope that with time and God's grace, we can find a path forward together." The post had been up for 2 hours and already had hundreds of reactions, mostly hearts and praying hands emojis. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. "You're such wonderful people. Everyone makes mistakes. Praying for your family during this difficult time. It takes courage to admit you were wrong. I admire you both so much. Family is what matters most. I hope Jamie can find it in her heart to forgive." I read through the comments, my hands shaking with rage. They were doing it again, rewriting the narrative, making themselves the victims, garnering sympathy while I was cast as the unforgiving, vindictive daughter who wouldn't accept their gracious apology. I called Thomas immediately. "Did you see what they posted?" "I did. I was about to call you. Don't respond yet. Let me review it with the legal team first." But I'd already been thinking about this exact scenario with my therapist, Dr. Stevens. We'd discussed what I'd do if my parents tried to manipulate public opinion. We'd even drafted a response just in case. I called Dr. Stevens next. "They did exactly what you predicted." "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Angry, but also clear. I know what I need to do." Over the next hour, I worked with Dr. Stevens and Thomas to finalize my response. It needed to be truthful without being vindictive. It needed to set the record straight without getting into a public fight. It needed to show strength and boundaries. 2 hours after my parents' post went up, I created a new Facebook account for the sole purpose of responding. I posted my statement, tagged several family members and church leaders who'd commented on my parents' post, and made it public. I've seen my parents' public apology, and I want to address it directly because truth matters. My parents didn't fail to realize the severity of what was happening to Alex. They were told explicitly by a neighbor that she heard him locked in a room crying for help for hours. They walked through the house where he was being abused. They chose to do nothing because acknowledging the truth would have been inconvenient and embarrassing. When I confronted them with evidence of abuse, they didn't apologize or try to help. They tried to discredit me and continued to support my sister, the person who was torturing my son. Their apology is not directed at me or at Alex, the actual victims. It's directed at their community because they've lost their social standing. Real apology includes changed behavior, accountability, and respect for boundaries. It includes private conversations with the people you've harmed before public performances. My parents have shown none of this. They haven't reached out to me privately. They haven't asked how Alex is doing. They haven't offered to testify against my sister or help in any way. This post is about managing their reputation, not about making amends. To anyone reading this, an apology without changed behavior is manipulation, not remorse. It's noise designed to make the apologizer feel better, not to repair harm. Watch what people do, not what they say. Judge character by actions over time, not by carefully crafted social media posts. I'm not interested in healing as a family with people who enabled my son's torture. I'm interested in protecting my son and building a family based on love, action, and genuine care, not blood obligation or social expectation. To my parents, you're not welcome in my life or in Alex's life. Please respect that boundary and stop using public platforms to pressure me into reconciliation I don't want and you haven't earned. To everyone else, thank you for your concern, but please understand that some family relationships are toxic, and the healthiest thing we can do is walk away. That's not vindictive. That's self-preservation. I posted it and turned off my phone. When I turned it back on 3 hours later, my post had been shared thousands of times. The comments were overwhelming. Thank you for this. I needed to hear that I don't owe toxic family forgiveness. Your strength is inspiring. Protect your son. You're doing the right thing. I'm 62, and I finally cut off my abusive mother last year. Your words validate that it's never too late to set boundaries. Anyone who enabled child abuse doesn't deserve access to that child. Period. The backlash against my parents was swift and severe. Within hours, their original post had become a battleground. People who'd initially commented support returned to delete their comments or post retractions. New comments appeared. I didn't know the full story. I take back what I said. This is manipulation, not apology. Disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourselves. By evening, the church had released a statement. Pastor Williams called me personally to read it before it went public. The Klein family has voluntarily stepped down from all leadership positions and volunteer roles while they address these serious concerns raised by recent events. We support all members of this family in their individual journeys toward healing. It was carefully worded, but the message was clear. My parents were no longer welcome in positions of authority or visibility. Thomas called with updates throughout the day. 3 family members have reached out to my office asking to speak with you. Your father's brother, your mother's sister, and a cousin. They all say they didn't know the full story, that they believe you and they want to support you. Old friends from high school reached out. Colleagues from the hospital sent messages of support. Even people I barely knew commented that my post had helped them understand their own toxic family dynamics. My parents tried to contact me directly. My phone number was blocked, so they tried email. When I didn't respond, they showed up at the hotel where Alex and I were staying. The front desk, warned by Thomas, refused to give them my room number and asked them to leave. That evening, sitting with Alex while he did a puzzle, Carol beside us helping, I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not satisfaction over my parents' social fall from grace, just clarity. They keep trying to reach you, Carol said quietly after Alex had gone to brush his teeth. How does that make you feel? Nothing. I said honestly. They're strangers who hurt me and endangered my son. Their opinions, their feelings, their desire for reconciliation, none of it matters to me anymore. Carol smiled, her eyes sad but proud. That's healthy. That's growth. You're not letting them manipulate you. I told Thomas to send them a cease and desist letter if they try to contact me again, I continued. They're not family. Family shows up when it's hard. They just showed off when it was easy. The consequences my parents faced, losing their church positions, their social standing, their community respect, weren't because I attacked them. I'd simply told the truth. The natural consequences of their choices finally caught up with them. Later that night, after Alex was asleep, I sat with Carol and Margaret, who'd stopped by with dinner. Margaret had brought her famous lasagna. Carol had made cookies. We ate together in comfortable silence, three women who'd found each other through tragedy. This is family, I said, suddenly looking at them both. This. People who show up, people who protect children, people who tell the truth even when it's hard. This is what family should be. Margaret squeezed my hand. Carol's eyes filled with tears. And as my past family crumbled, my chosen family was gathering strength I'd need for the trial ahead. The trial began on May 17th, exactly 5 months after that terrible Christmas Eve. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and granite designed to intimidate. I walked through security with Thomas Carroll on my other side, Mrs. Margaret just behind us. My chosen family showing up when it mattered. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the gallery. I recognized faces from church, from the neighborhood people who'd followed the case online. Judge Morrison presided, her expression unreadable as the bailiff called the court to order. Jury selection had taken 3 days. Thomas had been meticulous, looking for people who could handle graphic evidence without becoming desensitized, who understood that domestic violence was real, but didn't excuse child abuse. We ended up with 7 women and 5 men, ranging from a retired teacher to a construction worker to a young tech professional. Jennifer Walsh, the prosecutor, opened with devastating simplicity. This case is about a 6-year-old boy who was systematically tortured for 3 months by the adults who were supposed to protect him. The evidence you're about to see is graphic, disturbing, and undeniable. By the end of this trial, you'll have no doubt that Lily Klein is guilty of every charge against her. Marcus Chen, Lily's public defender, tried a different approach. This case is about a woman trapped in an abusive relationship controlled by a manipulative criminal who made terrible choices out of fear. Lily Klein is also a victim. That doesn't excuse what happened, but it explains it, and it matters for justice. The first week was brutal. Jennifer methodically presented evidence. Medical reports from Dr. Chen showing Alex's malnutrition, his healed fractures, the rope burns, the bruises in various stages of healing. Dr. Chen testified for 4 hours, explaining each injury, each sign of systematic neglect and abuse. The jury took notes. Several women wiped their eyes. Then came Dr. Hammond's forensic interview video. The courtroom went completely silent as Alex's small voice filled the space, describing the quiet room and the cold punishment, and thinking he was bad like mommy. I watched the jury. 3 women were crying openly. 2 men stared at their hands. The young tech professional looked like he might be sick. When the video ended, Judge Morrison called a recess. In the hallway, I saw 2 jurors standing by the window, visibly shaken. Week 2 brought the hidden camera footage. Jennifer had edited it down to 15 minutes, the worst clips, the most damning evidence. The jury watched Lily shove Alex into the closet. Lily slap him across the face. Lily withhold food. And most damning, Lily and Derek together tying his wrists with rope, laughing as they did it. One juror, an older man who reminded me of a grandfather, put his head in his hands when Lily's voice came through the speakers. "Lick it up like the animal you are." Mrs. Margaret testified on day 9. She described finding Alex chained outside, her regret at not acting sooner the moment she'd given him the hidden camera. "I failed my own grandson 20 years ago," she said, her voice breaking. "I won't fail another child. I saw what was happening, and this time I acted. Not fast enough, but I acted. Monica Rodriguez from CPS presented her findings. Alex's therapist testified about PTSD symptoms, night terrors, his fear of closets and cold weather, his belief that he was bad and deserved punishment. Then it was my turn. I testified for 6 hours spread over 2 days. Thomas walked me through everything. How Lily had asked to stay. How the house had been taken over. How I'd missed the signs because I was working so much. How I'd found Alex that Christmas night. Jennifer asked me to describe Alex now 5 months later. "He's healing," I said. "He's gained weight. He sleeps through most nights now, though he still has nightmares. He's in therapy twice a week. He's starting to laugh again to play like a normal 6-year-old. But he still flinches sometimes when someone raises their voice. He still asks me constantly if I'm coming back when I leave for work. He still thinks closets are scary places. That's what 3 months of abuse did to my son." Marcus's cross-examination tried to paint me as an absent mother who'd neglected Alex, creating an environment where Lily had to step in. But Thomas had prepared me. I stayed calm, factual. I worked to provide for my son. That's not neglect. Neglect is what Lily did when she starved him and locked him in closets and chained him outside in freezing weather. Week 3 was Lily's defense. Marcus presented evidence of Derek's control phone records showing he monitored her constantly, financial records showing he controlled all money, testimony from a domestic violence expert about coercive control. Then Lily testified. She cried through most of it. Described Derek's threats, his violence toward her, her fear. Marcus led her through a narrative of victimization that might have been compelling if not for one problem: the videos. Jennifer's cross-examination was surgical. "Ms. Klein, in this video from November 8th, we hear you laugh when Alex falls after you push him. Were you afraid in that moment?" I don't remember." "You don't remember laughing at a child's pain? Let's watch it again." The video played. Lily's laughter, clear and genuine, filled the courtroom. "Does that sound like someone acting out of fear, Ms. Klein?" Lily had no answer. The jury deliberated for 4 hours on May 31st. When they returned, the forewoman stood to read the verdict. My hands were shaking. Carol held my left hand. Margaret held my right. "Count 1 child endangerment. A felony, guilty." Lily gasped. "Count 2 child abuse, a felony, guilty." Lily's lawyer gripped her shoulder. "Count 3, false imprisonment of a minor, guilty." Lily started sobbing. "Count 4, conspiracy to commit identity theft, guilty." Lily collapsed in her chair, her whole body shaking. I sat perfectly still, feeling nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that this was right, that justice had been done. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for June 14th. Thomas helped me write a victim impact statement. It took me 3 days, 5 pages, every word carefully chosen. I described Alex's nightmares, his fear of closets, the way he'd regressed from a confident kindergartner to a scared child who clung to me constantly, his slow, painful healing. And the worst part: my son asked me last week if he was bad. He's 6 years old. He thinks he deserved to be tortured. That's what she did to him. She took a happy, confident child and broke him. We're putting him back together piece by piece, but some scars will never fully heal. Sentencing day was surreal. Judge Morrison reviewed pre-sentencing reports, letters from both sides, psychiatric evaluations of Lily. She considered everything: the severity of the abuse, Lily's lack of criminal history, her pregnancy, the domestic violence she'd suffered, her active participation in harming Alex. Finally, Judge Morrison spoke. "Lily Klein, you have been found guilty of 4 felonies related to the systematic abuse of a 6-year-old child. The evidence presented at trial showed you were not merely a bystander, but an active, enthusiastic participant in torturing an innocent child. While I acknowledge you experienced domestic violence from Derek Williams, that does not excuse your choices. You had opportunities to protect Alex. You chose to hurt him instead. She detailed the sentence: 3 years state prison suspended to 18 months house arrest with electronic monitoring due to the pregnancy. 5 years probation following. Mandatory parenting classes, therapy, and anger management. Permanent restraining order. Lily could never contact Alex again. No unsupervised contact with any minor child, including her own baby once born. CPS would monitor from birth with removal possible if abuse indicators appeared. If Lily violated house arrest conditions, the full 3-year prison sentence would activate immediately. Additionally, $30,000 in restitution to me for therapy costs and damages separate from Derek's $80,000. Lily was led away by deputies, her hands cuffed, her pregnancy just starting to show her life in ruins. I walked out of that courthouse with my chosen family, feeling the weight of 5 months lift slightly from my shoulders. Justice was served, but healing. That would take something more than courtrooms could provide. The trial was over, but the real work was just beginning. Alex needed years of therapy. I needed to rebuild our lives in a home that felt safe, not haunted by memories of abuse. Carol was helping me look at new houses, places where Alex could make fresh memories. Margaret had become Grandma Margaret to Alex, baking cookies and teaching him to garden. We were building something new from the rubble of what had been destroyed, not a perfect family, but a real one. One built on choice, on showing up, on love, demonstrated through action. That night, I tucked Alex into bed and he whispered, "Mommy, are we safe now?" I kissed his forehead and promised, "Yes, baby, we're finally safe." The weeks after the trial were strange. I'd spent 5 months building toward that moment, gathering evidence, preparing testimony, fighting for justice. Now that it was over, I felt unmoored. What came next? How did we move forward? Dr. Stevens, Alex's therapist, who'd become mine as well, suggested I join a support group for parents of abuse survivors. "You need community," she said. "People who understand what you've been through." The group met every Thursday evening at a community center in Ballard. I walked in that first night in August, 3 months after the trial, nervous and uncertain. About 15 people sat in a circle, mostly women, a few men ranging from their 30s to their 70s. The facilitator, a gentle woman named Patricia, asked me to introduce myself. "I'm Jamie," I said. "My sister abused my son for 3 months. I didn't see it happening until it was almost too late. We went through a trial. She was convicted. But I'm still trying to figure out how to help my son heal, and how to heal myself." Heads nodded around the circle. No one looked shocked or horrified. They understood. Over the next hour, I heard stories that echoed mine in heartbreaking ways. A father whose brother had abused his daughter during family gatherings. A grandmother whose own daughter had neglected her grandchildren. A mother whose husband's parents had enabled abuse for years before she finally cut them off. When the meeting ended, a woman in her 60s approached me. Her name was Susan, and she'd lost custody of her grandson to CPS after her son-in-law's abuse was discovered. "I thought blood made family," she said quietly. "I thought because he was my daughter's husband, I had to accept him, had to keep the peace. I ignored warning signs because I didn't want to cause drama. And my grandson paid the price." Her words hit me like a physical blow. That's exactly what I did. "But here's what I learned," Susan continued. "Blood doesn't make family. Choice makes family. The people who show up, who protect children, who do the hard thing even when it's uncomfortable. Those are family. The rest are just people we happen to be related to." I thought about Carol spending every Sunday with Alex and me, slowly building the mother-daughter relationship we'd been denied. I thought about Mrs. Margaret, who babysat Alex twice a week and had become Grandma Margaret in his heart. I thought about Dr. Stevens Thomas, my lawyer who'd taken my case pro bono and still checked in regularly, Monica from CPS, who'd gone above and beyond her job requirements. These people had no biological obligation to me, but they'd shown up. They'd fought for Alex when my blood relatives had enabled his torture. "You're right," I told Susan. "I've been building a new family. I just didn't realize that's what I was doing." As the weeks passed and I continued attending the group, another question kept coming up: forgiveness. People constantly asked me both in the group and outside it whether I'd forgiven Lily, whether I'd forgiven my adoptive parents. I struggled with how to answer until one evening a woman named Rachel shared her story. She'd spent 20 years trying to forgive her mother for enabling her stepfather's abuse. Everyone told me forgiveness was necessary for healing, Rachel said. So I kept trying, kept forcing myself to feel something I didn't feel. And it made me sick. I was trying to forgive someone who'd never changed, never apologized, never earned it. Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. The next time someone asked me about forgiveness, I had an answer. Forgiveness isn't required for healing, I said. Boundaries are. I explained it to the group, and the words felt true as I spoke them. I don't hate Lily anymore. I don't hate my adoptive parents. Hate takes energy, and I'd rather spend that energy on Alex, on building our new life. But forgiveness implies reconciliation. It implies a relationship. And reconciliation requires changed behavior and earned trust. None of them have shown that. I paused, gathering my thoughts. So I've chosen something better than forgiveness. I've chosen indifference. They no longer have power over my emotions. They're just people I used to know, people who made terrible choices. I don't wish them harm, but I also don't care what happens to them. That's true freedom. Around the circle, heads nodded. Several women were crying. After the meeting, 3 people told me that my words had given them permission to stop forcing forgiveness they didn't feel. But the most important lesson came not from the support group, but from watching Alex heal. In therapy one day, Dr. Stevens explained something that changed how I saw everything. Trauma is often generational, she said. Your adoptive parents probably learned their emotional coldness and favoritism from their own parents. They passed it to Lily, who then directed it at you and Alex. It's a cycle passed down like an inheritance of pain. I thought about my adoptive mother's mother, a cold woman who died when I was 10. I remembered how she'd barely acknowledged me, how she'd criticized everything my adoptive mother did. I thought about Lily watching our parents favor her while dismissing me, learning that some people mattered more than others. But cycles can be broken, Dr. Stevens continued. You can choose to be different. You can refuse to pass trauma to the next generation. That became my mission. I attended parenting classes. I stayed in therapy. I read books about healthy child development and attachment. I learned about emotional regulation, about modeling boundaries, about creating safety. Every morning I told Alex, "You are good. You are loved. You are safe." When he made mistakes, I didn't shame him. I taught him. When he expressed big emotions, I didn't tell him to be quiet. I validated him. When he needed me, I showed up not perfectly, but consistently. I modeled healthy boundaries too. When my adoptive parents tried to contact me through distant relatives, I said no clearly and without guilt. When Lily wrote letters from house arrest, I returned them unopened. I showed Alex through my actions that it's okay to protect yourself, that family doesn't entitle anyone to hurt you. The cycle ended with me. Not because I was perfect, I wasn't. I made mistakes daily, but because I was intentional. Because I decided that the cruelty that had been passed down through generations would not touch my son. That was my real victory. Not the guilty verdict or the sentencing or the public vindication. My victory was becoming the mother I'd needed, the mother Alex deserved. Breaking the cycle. Creating something new. And as I learned these lessons, as I watched Alex slowly transform from a traumatized child back into the joyful boy he should have been, Christmas approached again, a chance to rewrite the holiday that had once destroyed us. Christmas approached with a mix of anticipation and dread. How do you celebrate a holiday that once destroyed you? How do you rewrite a memory seared into your brain with such violence? Dr. Stevens suggested we create new traditions, new memories strong enough to override the old ones. So that's what we did. On December 24th, 1 year after that terrible night, I stood in the kitchen of our new house. It was smaller than the old one, a 3-bedroom craftsman in Greenwood that needed some updating but felt safe. I'd sold the house on Maple Street. Too many ghosts. Too many memories of finding Alex chained to that porch. Some places can't be redeemed. Alex was in the living room carefully hanging ornaments on our modest tree. He'd made most of them in art therapy, colorful paper creations, painted pine cones, salt dough shapes decorated with glitter. One in particular caught my eye, a house drawn in crayon with "My Family" written across the top in his careful 7-year-old handwriting. Stick figures surrounded the house, each labeled Mommy, Grandma Carol, Mrs. Margaret, Dr. Stevens. Not one biological relative among them. "Mommy, when is everyone coming?" Alex called out, his voice bright with excitement. This was the Alex I remembered from before, eager, joyful, trusting. He'd gained back the weight he'd lost, and then some. His nightmares had decreased from every night to maybe once a week. He'd made friends at his new school, real friends who invited him to birthday parties and play dates. His teacher said he was thriving. "Soon, baby. Half an hour." Our guest list was small but perfect. Carol arrived first, carrying a dish of her famous green bean casserole and wearing the scarf Alex had picked out for her birthday. She'd become Grandma Carol naturally, filling a role my adoptive parents had abdicated long ago. Mrs. Margaret came next, bringing her legendary sugar cookies and a new puzzle for Alex. At 73, she moved a bit slower, but her eyes were clear and warm. She'd told me once that helping save Alex had given her the redemption she'd been seeking for 20 years. Thomas arrived with wine and stories about his latest case. He'd become more than my lawyer. He was a friend, someone who checked in regularly and celebrated Alex's milestones with genuine joy. Dr. Stevens came last, bringing art supplies for Alex and a book for me about healing from family trauma. She'd been instrumental in both our recoveries, and I trusted her implicitly. We gathered around my small dining table, the one I'd bought specifically for this house, with no memories attached, and shared a meal of Carol's casserole, Margaret's cookies, and my somewhat lopsided attempt at roast chicken. It didn't matter that the food wasn't perfect. What mattered was the laughter, the warmth, the safety. Before we ate, Carol raised her glass of wine. Alex held up his apple juice, mimicking her gesture seriously. "To Jamie," Carol said, her voice thick with emotion, "who survived what I couldn't protect her from and built something beautiful from the wreckage. To Alex, the bravest boy I know. And to second chances, it's never too late to find your people." We clinked glasses. I looked around the table at these people who'd chosen to be my family and felt something I'd never experienced before, complete peace. After everyone left, I tucked Alex into bed. He was still clutching Mr. Trunks, the stuffed elephant that had been with him through everything. "Mommy," he whispered in the darkness, "is next Christmas going to be like this too?" I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Every Christmas, baby. Safe, warm, and full of people who love you." He smiled, his eyes already closing. "Good. This is the best Christmas ever." I stood in his doorway long after he'd fallen asleep, watching his chest rise and fall with peaceful breaths, listening to the small sounds of a child who felt safe enough to sleep deeply. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, the doormat who apologized for existing, who accepted cruelty as love, who stayed silent to keep the peace. That woman was gone. I'd found my voice. I'd fought for my son. I'd built a life on my own terms. Lily was serving house arrest in a small apartment, her baby monitored by CPS, her life circumscribed by court orders. Derek was in federal prison, year 1 of 8. My adoptive parents lived alone, ostracized by their community, their reputation destroyed by their own choices. And me, I was free. Completely, finally, beautifully free. Because the greatest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you, it's building a life so beautiful they can never touch it again. If this story touched your heart, if Jamie's journey reminded you that it's never too late to set boundaries and choose yourself, please subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when life gets hard. Leave a comment below, telling me, have you ever had to walk away from toxic family? What did that journey teach you? Your story matters, and this community is here to listen. Remember what Jamie learned. You don't owe forgiveness to people who haven't changed. You don't owe loyalty to people who hurt those you love. And you are never too old, never too late to build the life you deserve. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose peace over drama, boundaries over obligation, and chosen family over blood ties. Thank you for listening. Stay strong, stay safe, and remember, you are enough exactly as you are.